He was my son, my own flesh and blood. But when I discovered that hidden hole in the wall between his room and my 8-year-old granddaughter's, I understood that monsters can sometimes come from our own womb. That night, my old trembling hands became the instrument of justice that no one else would deliver. Good morning, my dear viewers. My name is Alice Teresa Johnson. I'm 76 years old, born in Pikeville, Kentucky, but today I live here in Oceanside, California. I live in a different kind of place, you know? A place where the walls are cold and the windows have bars. The people here call me Miss Alice, and the staff treat me with a certain respect. They say I'm the calmest elderly lady in this special facility for seniors who have committed crimes. From my window, I can see a small patch of the ocean. It's so beautiful when the sun hits the water in the early morning, like God himself is spreading liquid gold across the sea. Sometimes I see children playing on the beach in the distance, and my heart aches with longing for my granddaughter. If you enjoyed the beginning of this story, please click that like button and subscribe to the Grandparents' Tales channel. There are many stories like mine out there, stories of people who did what needed to be done when no one else would. And do you know why? Because sometimes true love isn't just made of hugs and kisses. Sometimes true love has claws and teeth to protect those who need protection. And you, my dear viewers watching now, tell me in the comments, which town are you watching from? And what time of day did you find this video? Early morning with your coffee after lunch, or already at night wrapped in a blanket? I always like to know who you are on the other side, listening to this story that, despite how painful it is to the soul, needs to be told. I'll tell you how a white-haired grandmother with wrinkled hands, whom everyone called senile old lady, ended up in this place. How I discovered that sometimes evil doesn't come from strangers. It comes from our own blood. And how a simple hole in the wall revealed the hell that was living under my own roof without me even imagining. I was born in a simple cabin with a dirt floor and a thatched roof on the outskirts of Pikeville. My father, John Johnson, worked in the coal mines, a strong and quiet man who came home when the sun was already setting, his naturally dark skin made even darker by work under the harsh Appalachian sun. My mother, Grace, was a baker who made the best pies and jam preserves in the region. When there was a church social or 4th of July celebration, everyone ordered Grace's preserves. We were 5 siblings, me, the youngest, my brothers Theodore, Arthur, and Oliver, and my sister Norma. Our house had only 2 rooms, the kitchen and one large room where we all slept on straw mats. We didn't have an indoor bathroom. It was a small outhouse near the barn where my father kept the 2 dairy cows he cared for with such affection. Life was hard, but it had its own sweetness in that simplicity. We woke up with the rooster's crow even before the sun appeared. While my mother lit the wood stove and prepared coffee, we children would fetch water from the well. It was almost a 15-minute walk, carrying buckets that felt heavier with each step on the way back. Play was what saved our souls. We played ring around the rosy, hide-and-seek between the apple and cherry trees. We made corn-husk dolls with straw hair, wooden cars with wheels made from empty spools. My brother Theodore was the most skillful, making toys that other children from the area would come to admire. At school, which was more than an hour's walk away, we studied in a single room with children of all ages. The teacher, Miss Zena, was as rigid as an oak trunk, but had a special way of teaching that made letters dance before our eyes. She was the one who saw that I had a facility with words and numbers, and convinced my father to let me continue studying when I turned 10, an age when many girls already stopped to help at home. My friends from that time. Dorothy, who lived on the neighboring farm and shared her secrets and girlhood dreams with me. Elmer, the storekeeper's son, who always saved a piece of rock candy for me when I went shopping for my mother. And Harriet, who had the most beautiful hair in the region, long down to her waist, black as a moonless night. Life in Pikeville in the 1950s was marked by harvest time, church gatherings, and the stories that elders told around the fire on cold nights. We had no electricity, so when the sun went down, Darkness was broken only by kerosene lamps and the kitchen stove fire. The sky, oh, the sky of that countryside, was a spectacle of stars that today, with so much light in the cities, we can hardly imagine. Sundays were special days. We wore our least worn clothes and went to the little Baptist church in the center of town. After the service, it was market day, where producers from the region sold everything: vegetables, fruits, cheeses, preserves, smoked meats, crafts. My mother set up her little stall of preserves, and I stood beside her, helping to sell. It was there that I learned to do mental arithmetic, to talk with customers, to understand the value of honest work. But not everything was sweet in my childhood. When I was 8, a terrible drought punished our region. The streams dried up, the well on our property began to yield muddy water, the crops died. My father had to go work even farther away, staying weeks without coming home. We went hungry that year, eating only what we could harvest from the yard. Some withered sweet potatoes, eggs from the chickens that survived, and sometimes a little cornmeal that some sympathetic neighbor would share. It was during this time that I first realized how cruel life can be. I saw children younger than me die from diseases that today would be easily treated. I saw entire families abandon their lands, departing on foot with their few bundles of clothes, seeking a better life elsewhere. I saw the desperation in the adults' eyes, something no child should witness. My father returned different from that time away, more quiet, his eyes always downcast, as if carrying an invisible weight on his shoulders. He began to drink the moonshine that he used to taste only at celebrations. He wasn't violent, thank God, but he closed himself in a silence so dense that it seemed like a wall between him and the rest of the family. It was my mother who held things together during that time. With a strength that I only understood when I became a mother myself, she multiplied what little we had. She made preserves with fruits she managed to collect in the wild, sold them door to door in town, washed clothes for wealthier families, sewed, cooked for parties. Her hands, already rough, became full of calluses and cracks that bled in the dry weather. When I turned 12, an important change happened in our family. My oldest brother, Theodore, got a job at a textile factory in Louisville. He was the first to leave the nest, carrying with him the promise to send money every month to help the family. The farewell was painful. My mother cried, hugging him for so long I thought she would never let him go. But he had to leave, and he did. The money Theodore sent changed our situation. Gradually, we were able to improve the house, buy some cattle, plant a larger field. And it was with this money that my father finally bought the family's first radio, a device that seemed magical to me. The voices and music that came out of that wooden box transported me to a world I didn't even know existed. In those final days of my childhood, I was already dreaming of horizons beyond the hills of Pikeville. I heard on the radio stories of big cities, of opportunities, of education. I wanted to be a teacher, perhaps, like Miss Zena, or a nurse, to care for sick people like those I had seen suffering during the drought. I didn't yet know the path life was preparing for me, but I already felt in my chest that restlessness, that call to something beyond what my eyes could see in the red lands of the Kentucky hills. When I turned 13, life began to change in a way I didn't expect. My sister Norma married a young man from Prestonsburg, the neighboring town, and went to live there. That same year, my father fell ill with pneumonia and, without the resources we have today, departed this world in less than 2 weeks. It was a shock for all of us, especially for my mother, who found herself a widow with 4 children to raise. It was during this time that I met Ignatius, the son of the store owner where we bought supplies. He was 5 years older than me, had a gentle way of speaking, and dark eyes that seemed to read my soul. He began to accompany me on the way to school, carried my books, secretly gave me sugar candies when no one was looking. I thought that was love, in my understanding as a girl. At 15, I was no longer a child. My body had changed, and the looks men gave me had changed too. My mother, concerned, was always saying, "Alice, A proper girl doesn't talk to just anyone, doesn't walk around alone. But Ignatius wasn't just anyone to me. He was my first love, the one that makes your heart beat faster, your hands sweat, your voice falter. When I turned 16, Ignatius asked for my hand in marriage. My mother thought it was too early. She wanted me to at least finish elementary school. But the financial situation at home was difficult, even with the help of the money Theodore sent from Louisville. A dowry, even a small one, and one less mouth to feed made a difference. We married in a simple ceremony at the Baptist church. My dress was borrowed from a cousin, the flowers were from the yard, the celebration was a lunch in the yard of my mother's house. I remember the smell of fried chicken, the white rice garnished with bits of carrot, the boiled sweet potatoes, the apple cider. Everything simple, but made with so much love that I can still taste it when I close my eyes. I went to live with Ignatius in a small house on the back of his parents' property. In the first few months, everything was roses. He worked at his father's store. I took care of the house and planted a small garden in the back. At night we talked about the future, about the children we would have, about a better life we would build together. But soon I realized that Ignatius had a side I didn't know. It started with small impatiences. Then came the constant criticisms of my way of cooking, of arranging the house, of dressing. "Can't you do anything right, Alice? You can't even cook beans without burning them?" The words hurt more than slaps. Over time, the situation worsened. Ignatius began to drink like my father in his last years. But unlike my father, who closed himself in a sad silence, Ignatius became aggressive. The first time he raised his hand to me was when I burned his favorite shirt while ironing. The iron was too hot and made a hole in the fabric. He came home from work, saw the shirt, and his face transformed into a mask of anger I never forgot. "You useless woman! You can't even do this right!" And came the slap, so strong that I fell sitting on the dirt floor of the kitchen. I cried all night, hidden under the blanket so he wouldn't hear. The next day, he acted as if nothing had happened. He even brought me a piece of rock candy, said he loved me. And I, foolish as I was, believed it had been just that one time. But it wasn't. The aggressions became part of our routine. A poorly washed dish, a meal without salt, a misplaced word. Anything was a reason. I learned to shrink myself, to stay quiet, to predict what might displease him. I lived walking on eggshells, as the older women used to say. At 18, I became pregnant with my first child. I thought the arrival of a baby would change Ignatius, that he would become the gentle man I had met. During the pregnancy, things really improved. He was proud to see my belly grow, made plans for the child, even bought a second-hand crib that he sanded and painted himself. When Oswald was born in 1967, it was one of the happiest days of my life. A strong, rosy-cheeked boy with his father's eyes. Ignatius seemed like a different man in those first few months. He would come home from work and go straight to see his son, pick him up, sing lullabies with his deep, off-key voice, which to me at that moment was the most beautiful in the world. But peace lasted only a short time. The baby's crying at night irritated Ignatius. "Make that child shut up, Alice. How is a man supposed to work without proper sleep?" I spent nights awake, rocking Oswald in my arms, breastfeeding, changing cloth diapers that I washed daily in the wash tub out back. When Oswald was almost 2, Ignatius lost his job at his father's store. The old man fell ill and had to sell the establishment. The new owner brought his own family to work. Ignatius was left without occupation, spending his days at home, drinking or wandering around town looking for odd jobs that rarely appeared. It was during this time that things really worsened. The short money, Ignatius's frustration, the child's crying. Everything became fuel for his anger. The shouting and slaps became punches and kicks. I learned to defend myself as best I could, to protect my son above all. I hid the bruises with long clothes even in the heat of summer, invented stories about falls and accidents when someone asked. One night, when Oswald was 3, Ignatius came home drunker than normal. I had served dinner, a potato soup with a piece of bacon, what I managed to make with the little we had in the pantry. He threw the plate against the wall. "This is pig food, not man's food," he shouted, advancing toward me with clenched fists. Oswald, who was playing in the corner of the kitchen with some empty spools, began to cry in fear. Ignatius turned to him. "Shut up, boy. Isn't your worthless mother enough?" It was the first time he directed his anger at the boy. Something inside me awakened, an instinct I didn't know existed. I placed myself between Ignatius and my son. "You don't touch him," I said, with a firmness that surprised us both. Ignatius hesitated for a moment, then laughed, a cold laugh that sent chills down to my soul. "Look at that. The hen became a lioness. Let's see for how long." That night, after Ignatius fell asleep, I made a decision. I couldn't continue like this. My son wouldn't grow up watching his mother being beaten, nor running the risk of suffering the same. I gathered our few clothes in a burlap sack, took the savings I hid inside the mattress, some coins and bills I saved from the change from groceries, and before dawn, I picked up Oswald in my arms and left that house never to return. I went to the Pikeville bus station. With the money I had, I could only buy a ticket to Louisville. I knew my brother Theodore lived there. I didn't have his address, but I hoped to find him, that he would help us. The trip was long and uncomfortable. Oswald, not understanding what was happening, cried and asked for his father. "We're going to see Uncle Theodore, son. It'll be good, you'll see," I said, trying to convince myself more than him. We arrived in Louisville at dusk. The big city scared me. So many lights, so many cars, so many hurried people. I, a country girl, had never seen anything like it. I stood at the bus station with Oswald in my arms and the sack of clothes beside me, not knowing where to go. That's when an older gentleman noticed my lost expression. He was the owner of a boarding house nearby. "Miss, do you need help?" he asked, with a kind look that reminded me of my father. I explained that I was looking for my brother, but didn't know where to find him, only that he worked at a textile factory. "I know which one," he said. "It's in the industrial district, but it's closed today. Why don't you stay at the boarding house tonight? Tomorrow I'll take you there." I was suspicious at first. Life had already taught me not to trust easily. But something in that man's eyes, whom I later discovered was named Gerald, told me he was sincere. And anyway, I had nowhere else to go. I spent that night at the boarding house, sharing a small bed with Oswald. I couldn't sleep properly, thinking about what Ignatius would do when he discovered we had fled, if he would come after us, if I would find Theodore the next day. Fear and uncertainty were like a knot in my chest, tightening, making even breathing difficult. The next day, Mr. Gerald kept his promise. He took me to the textile factory. At the gate, I asked for Theodore Johnson. The guard said yes, he worked there, in the dyeing section. He sent a young man to call him. When I saw my brother arriving, with his uniform stained with different colors, his face more adult than I remembered, I couldn't contain my tears. He stood frozen when he saw me, then ran and hugged me tight. "Alice? What are you doing here? And this boy?" Between sobs, I told him everything, about the marriage, the aggressions, the fear that Ignatius would hurt the child as well. Theodore listened to everything in silence, his face hardening as I spoke. When I finished, he said simply, "You're going to stay with me. That bastard will never touch you again." Mr. Gerald, who had waited outside, smiled when he saw the reunion. Theodore thanked him for helping me, offered to pay for the stay at the boarding house. Mr. Gerald refused. "Helping those in need has no price, young man. Just promise me you'll take good care of your sister and this little boy." That's how I began a new life in Louisville, under my brother's protection. He lived in a simple room in a workers' village near the factory. With our arrival, he managed to exchange it for a slightly larger place. It was still just one room, but there was space for a mattress for me and Oswald on the floor. He slept in a hammock, hung in a corner. Life in Louisville was a difficult new beginning, but away from Ignatius's hands, I felt I could breathe again. Theodore got me a job at the factory canteen, washing dishes and serving meals to the workers. The work was hard. It started at 5 in the morning and ended only after 3 in the afternoon. Oswald stayed at an improvised daycare that the women of the workers' village organized, each taking care of the children on different days. Our days were tight, but there was peace. At night, after Oswald fell asleep, Theodore taught me to read better. I had attended school in Pikeville, but only knew the basics. Gradually, I became truly literate, learning to write letters, to do more complex calculations, to read the old newspapers Theodore brought from the factory. When Oswald turned 5, I managed to enroll him in a small public school near where we lived. He was a bright boy, learned quickly, but had a difficult temperament. He would explode in fits of rage over small annoyances, hit other children. The teacher called me frequently to talk about his behavior. "It's normal," Theodore would say, trying to console me. "The boy went through a lot of trauma, saw things no child should see. With time, he'll improve." But I knew there was something more. Oswald had his father's eyes, not just the color, but that same frightening gleam that appeared when he was angry. Sometimes, looking at him, I saw Ignatius, and a chill ran down my spine. The years passed. Theodore met a girl from the factory, Zena, got married, and moved to his own house. Oswald and I continued in the small room in the village. I got a better job as a sewing assistant in a garment shop. The calloused hands from washing so many dishes in the canteen were now getting used to needles and threads. Oswald grew strong and healthy, but his temperament only worsened. At 9, he was expelled from school for breaking the nose of a classmate who mocked his torn sneakers. I managed to enroll him in another school, farther away, where no one knew him. I lied about the reason for the transfer, said we had moved. At night, I tried to talk to him, to understand what was going on inside that hurt little heart. "Son, you can't solve everything with your fists, understand? The world doesn't work that way." "It worked for my father," he would reply, with a look that chilled my soul. "You were just too weak to fight back." His words cut me like razors. Even so young, he had already absorbed the violence, already thought it was the natural way of things, and worst of all, he blamed me for not having fought against Ignatius. When Oswald turned 12, Ignatius showed up in Louisville. I never knew how he found us after so long. Maybe someone from Pikeville had seen me, passed on information. He appeared at the door of the garment shop where I worked, waiting for me at the exit. Older, thinner, with a face marked by drink, but still with those eyes that made me tremble. "I came to get my son," he said, blocking my path. "You stole him from me, you tramp." The old fear returned, paralyzing me for an instant. But I was no longer that frightened girl. "Get out of here, Ignatius. Oswald isn't going with you. There's nothing of yours here." He advanced, grabbed me by the arm with such force that it left purple marks. "You don't give the orders. I'm going to take my son, and you won't stop me." Luckily, the security guard at the shop saw the scene and came to help. Ignatius was expelled, but not before shouting, "This isn't over. I'll find you again. You'll see." That night, I didn't sleep. I knew Ignatius wouldn't give up easily. The next morning, I sought out my brother Theodore, told him what happened. He suggested that Oswald and I move far away, maybe to another state. He had a friend in the South, in California, who could arrange a job for me at a textile factory in Oceanside. The idea of starting over again, so far away, scared me. But the fear of Ignatius was greater. In 2 weeks, I gathered our few things, said goodbye to Theodore and Zena, and left with Oswald for California. The trip was long and tiring. Oswald, now 12, remained silent most of the time. When I asked if he was sad about leaving Louisville, his school friends, he replied, "I want to meet my real father. You never allowed it." That caught me by surprise. "Son, your father, he's not a good man. He hurt me, hurt you when you were little. We left Pikeville to protect ourselves." "That's your lie," he replied, with anger in his eyes. "You were the one who wasn't good as a wife. That's why he got angry. That's what Grandma Grace told me in the letters." I then discovered that my own mother, who continued in Pikeville, had maintained secret contact with Oswald, passing the address to Ignatius. The betrayal hurt me more than any beating I had ever taken. We arrived in Oceanside on a cold day in June 1979. Theodore's friend, Walter, met us at the bus station. He was a middle-aged man, a widower, quiet but good-hearted. He took us to his house where we would stay until finding our own place. The work at the textile factory was exhausting, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, but it paid better than anything I had ever done before. Oswald was enrolled in a local school, but went unwillingly. He suffered bullying from classmates because of his different accent, simple clothes, for being an outsider. The relationship between us worsened every day. He blamed me for everything, for having left Pikeville, for not having a present father, for being poor. The arguments became increasingly frequent and intense. One day, returning from the factory, I found our room ransacked. The drawers open, clothes on the floor. The money I kept inside an empty jar, hidden behind the wardrobe, was gone, along with Oswald. I searched everywhere, asked the neighbors, his school friends. No one knew where he was. Only the next day, when I received a telegram, did I understand what had happened. Mom, went to find my father. Don't look for me. In despair took over me. I imagined my son in the hands of that violent man, learning to be like him. I wanted to go after him, but had no money for the trip back to Kentucky. Oswald had taken everything. Walter, seeing my suffering, offered help. I'll lend you the money for the ticket, but think carefully. Maybe it's better to let the boy discover for himself what kind of man his father is. Part of me knew he was right. Oswald was so full of anger against me that any attempt to bring him back would only make things worse. But a mother's heart bled just thinking of my boy far away, exposed to that harmful influence. I decided to wait. I continued working, saving every penny. I sent letters to Pikeville, to my mother, begging for news of Oswald. The answers, when they came, were dry. He's fine. He's with his father. Leave them in peace. Months turned into years. The pain of my son's absence never diminished, but I learned to live with it. I continued in Oceanside, working at the factory. Over time, I was promoted to quality supervisor, earning a little better. I managed to rent a simple little house for myself, gathered some furniture, created a routine. In 1985, 6 years after Oswald's escape, I received an unexpected visit. He, now an 18-year-old man, was at the door of my house. Taller than me, with broad shoulders like his father's, but with even harder eyes. He carried a small suitcase and his face marked by a recent bruise on his left eye. "Can I come in?" he asked, without hugging me, without showing any emotion at seeing me after so long. At that moment, all the resentment I might have felt dissolved. It was my son, my boy, coming back to me. I opened my arms, tears flowing freely. "Of course you can, son. This has always been your home, too." He entered, looking around with curiosity, evaluating the simplicity of the furniture, the curtains I had sewn myself, the few ornaments that cheered up the environment. He made no comment. Gradually, through tense conversations and prolonged silences, I understood what had happened. Oswald had found Ignatius in Pikeville, lived with him for a time. In the beginning, everything seemed fine. Ignatius treated him like a king, bought presents, told stories where I was always the villain. But as Oswald grew and began to question certain things, to develop his own opinions, the relationship soured. The same fists that had beaten me so many times turned against the son. The last fight, which resulted in the black eye and the decision to leave, had been about a girlfriend that Ignatius didn't approve of. He said he was going to teach me to be a man, that he would beat her in front of me so I could learn how to treat women, Oswald recounted, with a coldness that frightened me. That's when I hit him first. I caught him off guard, drunk as always. I left him unconscious and came away. Part of me felt relief knowing my son had defended himself, had refused to follow his father's path. Another part trembled realizing that violence continued there, had only changed direction. You did right to leave, son, and in not hurting the girl. Violence doesn't solve anything, it only brings more pain. He looked at me with those eyes that seemed not to blink. You're wrong. Violence does solve things, but it has to be used against those who deserve it. At that moment, a chill ran up my spine. But I swallowed my fear, trying to see only the positive. My son was back, away from Ignatius's influence, with the chance to build a better life. The first months of Oswald's return were for adaptation. I arranged a job for him at the textile factory in the machine maintenance section. He had a knack for mechanics, learned quickly. The salary wasn't much, but it helped with household expenses. At night, he frequently went out. He came back late, sometimes smelling of drink, sometimes with marks of fights. When I tried to talk, to show concern, he would get irritated. You're not my boss. I'm a grown man. In 1987, Oswald met Nancy, a girl who worked in the administrative sector of the factory. She was a pretty young woman, with blonde hair and green eyes, educated, gentle, always smiling. I saw that relationship with hope. Perhaps the love of a good woman could heal the wounds that Oswald carried. They began dating, and Oswald seemed calmer, more centered. He went out less, drank less, even took me to dinner at a simple restaurant on her birthday, the three of us together. It was one of the happiest nights I had in many years. The following year they announced their marriage. Nancy was 2 months pregnant. Oswald seemed genuinely happy with the idea of being a father. We talked about the past, about Ignatius, about the mistakes that shouldn't be repeated. For the first time, I felt he had really understood what I went through, that he no longer blamed me for having fled with him. Mom, he said, in a rare demonstration of affection, holding my calloused hands between his, I'm going to be a different father. I'm going to take care of my child as Dad never took care of me. You'll see. The ceremony was simple in the Methodist church that Nancy's family attended. I, as a Baptist, felt a little out of place, but happy to see my son starting a new life, apparently leaving behind the traumas of the past. They rented a little house not far from mine. I helped as I could, knitting clothes for the baby, preparing treats on weekends, giving the advice that every mother-in-law gives, trying not to be too intrusive. In September 1988, my first granddaughter was born, Lena, a beautiful baby with her mother's eyes and the dimple in her chin that Oswald had as a child. Seeing him holding that small and fragile thing, crying with emotion, I was sure that the ghosts had been left behind. My son would be a good father, a good husband. The cycle of violence was broken. How wrong I was. The first years of Lena's life were relatively peaceful. Oswald worked hard, had been promoted to maintenance supervisor at the factory. Nancy left her job to care for their daughter full-time. They moved to a slightly better house with a small yard where Lena could play. I visited them whenever I could, bringing cakes and sweets that I learned to make in the region, like apple pie and cornbread that I learned from the neighbors. Lena grew up strong and intelligent, talkative and curious. She had dark hair like her father's, but her mother's green eyes. She was my ray of sunshine, my joy on weekends. When Lena turned 5, Nancy went back to work. The girl stayed at kindergarten during the day. Gradually, I began to notice changes in my son's behavior. Small things at first: impatience with Nancy over a dinner that took too long, irritation when Lena made too much noise while playing. Nothing serious, nothing that stood out. In 1994, when Lena was 6 years old, Nancy became pregnant again. It was a difficult pregnancy, with lots of morning sickness, high blood pressure, constant rest. Oswald showed less enthusiasm than the first time. We already have one daughter. Why complicate things, he would say, not hiding his displeasure. Nancy lost the baby in the 5th month. It was a hard blow for her, who sank into a deep depression. Oswald, instead of supporting her, distanced himself. He began to go out more, to drink on weekends, to come home late. I tried to help as I could, taking care of Lena, cooking, but I lived a few blocks away and worked during the day. On a Sunday afternoon, I visited them without warning. I was bringing a chocolate cake, Lena's favorite. I found Nancy crying in the kitchen with a cut on her lip. When I asked what had happened, she said she had fallen in the bathroom, but her eyes told another story. "It was Oswald, wasn't it?" I asked softly, so that Lena, who was playing in the room, wouldn't hear. Nancy denied it, frightened. "No, Miss Alice, nothing like that. It really was an accident." But I knew that type of accident too well. I had lived through many of them with Ignatius. The ghost I had feared so much was back, only now it was my own son transforming into the monster his father had been. I tried to talk to Oswald that same night when he returned. He denied everything, became furious with my interference. "You mind your own business. Problems between me and my wife are between us," he said, his eyes shining in that way that reminded me so much of Ignatius that it hurt. I left there devastated, but determined not to let history repeat itself. I began to visit more often, to observe, to try to create a relationship of trust with Nancy so she would open up to me. It was difficult. She was ashamed, afraid, didn't want to admit what was happening. Things got worse when, in 1996, the textile factory where we worked went through a restructuring. Many people were laid off, including Oswald. The blow to his pride was enormous. He spent weeks at home, drinking, blaming the world, blaming Nancy, blaming me for having dragged him to Oceanside so many years before. He got another job at a metalworking company, earning less. His mood only worsened. Nancy's falls and accidents became more frequent. Lena, now 8 years old, became increasingly quiet, more withdrawn. On a Saturday morning in March 1997, Nancy appeared at my door. Her eye was so swollen she could barely open it. She brought Lena by the hand, frightened. "I need help, Miss Alice," she said, with a choked voice. "I can't anymore." I took them inside. I prepared tea, tried to calm Lena, who seemed in a state of shock. Nancy, between sobs, told everything. How Oswald had started hitting her right after the loss of the baby. How the situation had worsened with his dismissal. How he blamed her for everything, even for the rainy weather that ruined his weekends. "I'll call the police," I said, determined not to make the same mistake I made with Ignatius, letting the violence continue for years. "No!" Nancy exclaimed in panic. "He'll kill me if I report him. He promised he would do that if I told anyone." The fear in her eyes was real, palpable. I knew that fear. I had lived with it. I knew it wasn't an exaggeration. Men like Ignatius, like Oswald, were capable of fulfilling that kind of threat. "Then let's leave," I suggested. "The three of us, far from here. I know someone in San Diego, an old colleague from the factory who moved there. She can help us start over." We spent the rest of the day planning. Lena would stay with me while Nancy went back to get important documents and some clothes, taking advantage that Oswald would be at a barbecue with colleagues from the metalworking company. We would meet at the bus station late afternoon. The plan seemed perfect. I packed a small suitcase, took my savings hidden inside a rice container, the simple jewelry I had, a pair of earrings, a thin gold chain that I received on my 60th birthday. I was ready to leave everything behind once again to save Nancy and Lena from the same story I had lived. But Nancy never appeared at the bus station. We waited for hours, Lena and I, sitting on those hard plastic benches, looking at each bus that arrived, at each person who entered. Nothing. Night fell, and with it, my heart. "Grandma, isn't Mommy coming?" Lena would ask, her little eyes full of fear. "She must be delayed, my dear. Let's wait a little longer." But deep down, I already knew. Something had gone wrong, very wrong. I couldn't go home. Oswald might be there, looking for us. I couldn't go to their house for the same reason. We decided to spend the night at a cheap motel near the bus station and the next morning seek help. It was the longest night of my life, consoling Lena, who cried calling for her mother, while I myself choked back tears, imagining the worst scenarios. In the morning, we went to the police station. I explained the situation, the aggressions, our escape plan, Nancy's disappearance. The sheriff looked at me with a mixture of boredom and disbelief. "Ma'am, this is a couple's quarrel. Your daughter-in-law probably gave up on going, is at home with her husband, resolving their differences like adults. You'd better do the same, go home and not interfere." I insisted. I talked about the swollen eye, about the death threats. He wrote something on a paper, said he would send a patrol car to check on their house, but that I shouldn't create unnecessary commotion. I left there devastated, but didn't give up. I took Lena to a trusted neighbor's house and went to the metalworking company where Oswald worked. I needed to know if he was there, if he had gone to work normally. He wasn't there. The secretary said he had called saying he wouldn't come, that he had a family problem. Fear turned into panic. I returned to the police station, insisted so much that the sheriff, irritated, finally sent a patrol car to their house. I waited, hoping they would tell me everything was fine, that Nancy was there, alive, that I was imagining the worst needlessly. But when the officer returned, his face said it all. They had found Nancy unconscious with serious injuries. Oswald wasn't in the house. An ambulance had already been called. I ran to the hospital, leaving Lena with the neighbor. Nancy was in the ICU, with head trauma, broken ribs, internal bleeding. The doctors didn't give me much hope. She was brutally beaten, the doctor said, without beating around the bush. If she survives, she may have permanent sequelae. 3 days later, Nancy died without regaining consciousness. I never had the chance to say goodbye, to ask forgiveness for not having acted earlier, for not having saved her as I couldn't save myself so many years ago. Oswald disappeared. The police issued an arrest warrant, but he seemed to have vanished into thin air. I stayed with Lena, who was now officially under my guardianship. The girl almost didn't speak, didn't cry. She was in a state of shock, the doctors said. She would need therapy, lots of love, time to process the terrible trauma. We couldn't continue in Oceanside. There were too many memories, too much pain, and the constant fear that Oswald might reappear. So, in April 1997, I moved with Lena to San Diego, where my ex-colleague from the factory, Diana, helped us start over. I found work as a seamstress in a small garment shop. Lena was enrolled in a new school. I rented a simple little house in a quiet neighborhood. Gradually, we tried to build a new life, away from the ghosts of the past. For 2 years, we had no news of Oswald. Lena, with the help of therapy, began to speak again, to smile sometimes, to play with other children. I thanked God every day for this small improvement, for this chance to start over. Then, on a rainy night in August 1999, the doorbell of our house rang. When I opened the door, my heart almost stopped. It was Oswald, thinner, with an unshaven beard, red eyes, smelling of alcohol. But it was still him, my son, the murderer of his own wife. "I came to see my daughter," he said, trying to enter. I stood in front of the door, blocking the passage. "No, Oswald, you can't come in." "I'm going to call the police." "You're not going to do that," he replied, with a cold smile. "Not against your own son, flesh of your flesh." He was right. Despite everything, my mother's heart still hesitated. But my responsibility to Lena was greater than any feeling. "Go away, Oswald. The police are looking for you. You killed Nancy." His face contorted into an expression of anger. "It was an accident. She fell. I didn't want to hurt her that way." "You beat her until she died," I said, feeling the tears run down. "Like Ignatius did to you, like he did to me. You became just like your father." The mention of Ignatius seemed to hit him like a slap. For an instant, I saw confusion in his eyes, perhaps even regret. But it passed quickly. "Let me see Lena. Just a bit. She's my daughter. No, Oswald. Go away or I'll call the police now. He pushed me hard, making me fall. He entered the house, calling for Lena. Thank God she was in the bedroom, sleeping soundly after a day at school. I ran to the phone, dialed 911 with trembling hands. When the police arrived, Oswald had already fled again. I filed the report, described what happened. The police promised to reinforce the search, but I knew it would be difficult to find him if he didn't want to be found. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept watch over Lena's sleep, a kitchen knife beside me, ready to defend my granddaughter with my life if necessary. In the following days, I hired a man to install bars on the windows, reinforced locks on the doors. I changed our schedules, began to take and pick up Lena at school personally, never leaving her alone for a minute. But you can't live in a constant state of alert forever. Gradually, when months passed without a sign of him, I began to relax a little. Maybe he had realized the risk. Maybe he had gone far away. Maybe. In 2000, I got a better job at a larger garment factory in San Diego. The salary was good, allowed us to move to a slightly better house in a gated community with a doorman. Lena, now 12 years old, seemed to finally overcome the trauma. She had friends at school, brought good grades, smiled more. On a morning in September 2000, I received a call that changed everything again. It was from the sheriff's office in Oceanside. After fleeing our house in San Diego that rainy night in August 1999, Oswald had continued on the run, using false names and hiding in different cities. The sheriff explained that he had been drunk, lost control of his vehicle on a curve in the road, rolled over several times. The license plate of the car wasn't even his, but fingerprints confirmed his identity. They were still in the system because of Nancy's case. This is how my son's escape ended. He spent his last months living like a ghost, without a name, without a home, without a family. The news hit me like a punch in the stomach. Despite everything he had done, he was still my son. I cried for days, hidden from Lena, divided between grief and guilty relief, knowing he would never threaten us again. I didn't tell Lena that her father had died. She believed he was in prison, far away, that he would never come back. I saw no reason to reopen wounds, to make her process another loss. My granddaughter had already suffered enough for several lifetimes. With time, the wound began to heal. We built a quiet life in San Diego. Lena grew strong, intelligent, resilient. I finished raising her alone, with all the love a grandmother can give. We became not only family, but best friends. We talked about everything, except the dark past we were trying to leave behind. In 2004, when Lena turned 16, I met Richard. He was a widower, worked as an accountant at an import company at the port of San Diego. We met at the church I attended. A gentle, educated, respectful man. After so many years alone, caring only for Lena, I allowed myself to open my heart again. Richard and I married in 2005 in a small ceremony. Lena was my maid of honor, beautiful in a light blue dress that I sewed especially for her. We moved to Richard's house, larger and more comfortable than ours. Finally, it seemed that life was giving us a real chance at happiness. The first few months were peaceful. Richard treated Lena as the daughter he never had. She, initially shy with him, soon got used to his gentle presence, his easy laugh, his advice about school and the future. Then gradually, I noticed changes. Lena, who had always been so open with me, began to close herself off. She spent more time in her room, hardly talked during meals. When I asked if everything was okay, she would just answer yes and look away. I thought it was just adolescence, perhaps jealousy because I had married, because I was dividing my attention that before was all hers. I talked with the psychologist who had been seeing her since she was little, who reassured me, saying this phase of distancing was normal, that I should give her space. But my grandmother's heart felt there was something more. Something wrong, very wrong, that I couldn't identify. One night, I woke up in the early hours to a strange noise. It wasn't crying or talking. It was a rhythmic sound, like something scratching or softly tapping. Richard wasn't in bed. Probably had gone to the bathroom, I thought. I got up to check. The noise was coming from Lena's room. I walked down the dark hallway, my heart racing without knowing why. The door to her room was slightly open. I peeked in. The bed was empty. The sound was coming from the large wardrobe that stood in the corner of the room. I approached slowly, confused. Why would Lena be in the wardrobe in the middle of the night? Perhaps sleepwalking. She had never shown this before. I opened the wardrobe door. I pushed aside the clothes hangers. And then I saw. The back of the wardrobe was loose, moved aside, and behind it there was a hole in the wall. A hole that led directly to the next room, Richard's office, which shared a wall with Lena's room. And through the hole, I heard his voice, and my granddaughter's muffled sobs. At that moment, the world stopped spinning. Everything went into slow motion. The horror of what was happening hit me like a ton of bricks. My mind flew to all the times Lena had closed herself off, to the dark circles under her eyes, to the fear in her gaze when Richard entered the room. He had made that hole. Used it to enter her room during the night, to do to my granddaughter what Ignatius had done to me, what Oswald had done to Nancy. The cycle of abuse that I had tried so hard to break was happening again, right under my nose. Something inside me exploded. I was no longer the frightened Alice who fled from Ignatius. I was no longer the mother who failed to protect Nancy from Oswald. I was a grandmother facing the monster that threatened what was most precious to me in the world. Silently, I moved away. I went back to the bedroom, my mind working on a plan. I couldn't confront him at that moment. He could hurt Lena, hurt me, flee before the police arrived. No, I needed to be smart. I waited. I waited until I heard Richard return to our bed, pretending to be asleep. I waited until his snoring became heavy, indicating he was in deep sleep. And then I got up. I went to the linen closet, got the heaviest pillow in the house, the one we kept for guests, and returned to the bedroom. Richard slept on his back, his mouth slightly open, oblivious to what was coming. The senile old lady he thought didn't know anything approached silently. I placed the pillow over his face and pressed with all the strength I could gather. He woke up, tried to fight, his arms flailing, trying to push me away. But anger and desperation gave me a strength I didn't know I had. It took a long time, longer than I imagined. But finally, the snoring stopped, and the silence that came after. It was the first silence of peace that house had had in a very long time. When I was sure it was done, I went to Lena's room. She was sleeping now, exhausted, tears still damp on her face. I caressed her hair gently, so as not to wake her. "Never again, my love," I whispered. "Never again will anyone hurt you." The next morning, I called the police. When they arrived, I showed them the hole in the wall. I told about the abuse, about how I discovered it, about how I protected my granddaughter in the only way I could think of. I denied nothing. They arrested me, of course. There was no other possibility. I was tried and convicted of homicide, with mitigating circumstances due to the situation, but still a long sentence. Because of my age, I was sent to this special facility instead of a regular prison. Lena went to the care of Aunt Diana, my friend who helped us when we arrived in San Diego. The investigations confirmed what I already knew. Richard had abused her for months, using that hole in the wall that he himself had made, threatening to hurt her and me if she told anyone. The first days in prison were the hardest. Not because of the place itself, the gray walls, the bars, the rigid rules, but because of the separation from Lena. My granddaughter, my son, my reason for living was out there while I was in here. The idea of not seeing her grow up, of not being present to protect her, ate at me from the inside. But the system sometimes surprises with small glimpses of humanity. The prosecutor of my case, Dr. Olivia Parker, a serious middle-aged woman with eyes that seemed to see beyond appearances, became interested in my situation. After hearing the whole story, not just the murder of Richard, but the whole chain of abuse that came from Ignatius, passing through Oswald, culminating in Richard, she decided my case deserved special attention. "Miss Alice," she said during a visit to the prison, a few weeks after my conviction, "what you did was wrong in the eyes of the law, but I understand why you did it, and I'll help you as I can." It was she who arranged my transfer to the special facility for elderly people who committed crimes, a less severe place than the regular prison. It was also she who got authorization for Lena to visit me regularly, despite the normal restrictions. Lena. My Lena was under Diana's legal guardianship, as planned. In the beginning, she came to see me once a month, always accompanied by the psychologist. They were difficult encounters, laden with contradictory emotions. She was relieved to be free from Richard, but confused about my action, about being separated from me. A teenager, trying to process traumas that adults would have difficulty handling. During the first visits, we hardly spoke. We would sit side by side, sometimes holding hands, sometimes just looking out the window. Gradually, words began to flow. She told me about school, about friends, about how Diana treated her well. And then, during a visit almost 6 months after the event, she finally talked about that night. "Grandma," she said with a choked voice, eyes fixed on the floor, "I should have told you about the hole in the wall, about what he did." My heart tightened. I took her hands between mine, those hands still so small, so young. "No, my darling, it wasn't your fault. He threatened you, threatened to hurt me. You were just a scared child. But you're here because of me. If I had spoken earlier—" "I'm here because I made a choice," I interrupted gently. "And I would do it again, 1,000 times, if it was to protect you." From that day on, something changed between us. An invisible weight was lifted. Lena began to come more often. Our conversations became lighter. She brought me drawings, then letters, then photos of outings with friends. Life continued out there, and my granddaughter was growing, healing her wounds, moving forward. Meanwhile, inside the prison facility, I also found my way. I began to crochet again, something I hadn't done since the days in Oceanside. My hands, aged and marked by time, found comfort in the repetitive movement of the needles, in creating something beautiful from a simple thread. One of the guards, Miss Christina, noticed my work. "Miss Alice, you have a gift. These pieces are beautiful." It was she who suggested I teach other inmates. Soon, we formed a small group that met 3 times a week in the common room. Elderly women like me, each with her story, her regrets, her ghosts. Crocheting united us, gave us a purpose, a way to pass the time that wasn't just ruminating on the past. The pieces we produced, blankets, scarves, caps, socks, were donated to nurseries and orphanages in the region. Knowing that something made by our hands brought comfort and warmth to needy children alleviated a bit the weight of guilt that we all carried. In the 2nd year of my sentence, Dr. Olivia returned with news that would change everything. After a review of my case, considering the extreme circumstances, my advanced age, and my exemplary behavior in the institution, there was a possibility of sentence reduction. "I'm not promising anything, Miss Alice," she said, always cautious. "But I'll fight for you to spend your last years outside of here, with your granddaughter." It was a long process. Hearings, testimonies, psychological reports. Lena, now 18 years old, testified in my favor, telling in detail what she had suffered at Richard's hands, how I had been her only protection throughout her life. Diana also testified, talking about how she met me, about the dedication I always had for Lena, about how our escape from Oceanside had been an act of protection against Oswald. And then came the most surprising testimony. Theodore, my brother, whom I hadn't seen for more than 15 years, traveled from Louisville to San Diego to speak in my defense. He was already an old man with white hair, his body bent by years of hard work, but with eyes still alive and bright. "My sister," he said before the judge, "has spent her entire life running from violent men, protecting those she loves. First, she fled from the husband who beat her to save her small son. Then, when that same son became like his father, she fled again to save her granddaughter. When the third monster appeared in her life, she had nowhere else to run. She did what she thought she needed to do to protect that girl. If that's a crime, then it's a crime of love." Theodore's words, simple but powerful, moved everyone in the room. Even the judge, usually impassive, needed to remove his glasses and discreetly wipe his eyes. After 3 months of hearings and deliberations, the decision came. My sentence would be reduced, and I would serve the remainder under house arrest with electronic monitoring. I could live with Lena, who now, being of legal age, had a small house of her own, bought with the money from the indemnity she received for the abuse case. The day of my release from the prison facility was sunny, as if even the sky was celebrating. Lena waited for me at the gate, beautiful at 18, her long hair tied in a ponytail, the luminous smile I feared I would never see again. We hugged for so long that the guards had to gently separate us. "Come, Grandma," she said, picking up my small suitcase. "Let's go home." Lena's house was simple but welcoming. 2 bedrooms, a small living room, a kitchen that opened onto a small yard where she had planted sunflowers, my favorite flowers. In my room, a surprise, a wooden loom, new, shining. "For you to continue your crochet," she explained shyly. "Miss Christina told me how much it helped you in there." At that moment, looking at my granddaughter, at the home she had built for us two, I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in decades. The cycle of violence that began with Ignatius, that almost repeated with Oswald and Richard, was finally broken. Lena was safe, and I, despite everything, was there to see her flourish. In the months that followed, we built a new routine together. Lena studied nursing at the local college. She chose the profession inspired by the kind nurses who helped her after the revelation of the abuse. I took care of the house, did my crochet, helped in the volunteer work that Lena did at a nursing home on weekends. My electronic monitoring prevented me from going too far, but that didn't bother me. After a lifetime in motion, fleeing from one place to another, it was a relief to finally be stationary, safe, at peace. Sometimes, on summer nights, we would sit on the small back porch looking at the stars. Lena would tell me about her plans for the future, finishing college, working at the city hospital, maybe one day getting married and having children. Children who would grow up without fear, without violence, without holes in the walls. "You know, Grandma," she said on one of those nights, holding my wrinkled hand. "For a long time, I asked myself why everything happened to us. Why Mom had to die. Why Dad was that way. Why Richard. Well, why everything. And I don't have answers. But I know one thing. You broke the cycle. You prevented me from becoming just another victim who could later repeat the story. You saved not only me, but also the children I might one day have." Her words brought tears to my eyes. Maybe she was right. Maybe my story, as painful as it was, had served something greater, to break a chain of pain that could have continued for generations. And as we looked together at the starry sky of San Diego, I silently thanked for every step of the way, even the most painful ones that brought me there. To that perfect moment of peace, with my granddaughter at my side, free from fear, full of hope for the future. Today, at 76 years old, I live a quiet life here in Oceanside. It's been almost 6 years since I left the prison facility, and even with the electronic monitoring on my ankle, I found a peace I never imagined possible in life. Our little house is simple, but it's a real home. Lena graduated in nursing and works at St. Teresa Hospital, right here in Oceanside. Seeing my granddaughter in a white uniform, healing visible and invisible wounds, fills me with a pride that barely fits in my chest. My routine is calm, as befits a lady my age. I still wake up with the roosters, as my mother used to say back in Pikeville. In the morning, I take care of the house and do my crochet, which I sell to a little shop downtown. It's not much money, but it gives me satisfaction. Twice a week, I receive a visit from the social worker, Miss Nadine, who checks if I'm fulfilling the conditions of my parole. With time, these visits have almost turned into friends' meetings. "You're my success case," she always says. I don't feel like an example of anything. I just did what needed to be done to protect those I loved. But I'm happy that the system, at least in this case, worked as it should. Lena, my greatest pride, blossoms every day. At 24, she has already earned respect at the hospital and is specializing in pediatric care. She wants to help children so that none suffer what she suffered. A year ago, she met Andrew, a young resident doctor. He's a gentle, respectful young man with a soft voice and sincere eyes. I confess that at first I was apprehensive. The fear that history would repeat itself, that another violent man would enter our lives, was still there, like a shadow. But Andrew is not like Ignatius, not like Oswald, not like Richard. He treats Lena with the respect she deserves. "Miss Alice," he told me one night, "I know part of your story. Lena told me. I want you to know that I admire you very much for what you did to protect her. And I promise that I will always take care of her, respect her, honor her as she deserves." His words moved me deeply. Perhaps finally the wheel had really stopped turning. Perhaps Lena had found what I never could, a true love, without fear. I still have nightmares, you know? I wake up sweaty, with my heart racing, hearing again those muffled sobs, seeing that cursed hole in the wall. But then I look out the window, see the lights of Oceanside, take a deep breath, and remember that everything is fine now. That I managed to protect my little granddaughter, even if the price was high. The scars remain, there's no use pretending they don't. But I've learned to live with them, to accept that they are part of my story. When I look back, to the frightened girl who fled from Ignatius, to the desperate mother who tried to save Nancy, to the grandmother who did the unthinkable to protect Lena, I see a continuous line of struggle and survival. I know my time on this earth isn't infinite. At 76 years old, and with health weakened by so much suffering, each day is a gift. My greatest joy is knowing that, when I depart, I will leave Lena well, safe, loved. That the violence that marked so many generations of my family stopped with me. That my granddaughter will live a life without fear, without holes in the walls. And I would do it all again, without hesitating a second, to protect my Lena. Because a grandmother's love is the most powerful force I've ever felt. It's what gives me peace, even with the weight of the past, even with the memories that sometimes still haunt me on the darkest nights. My dear ones who have listened to me until now, I want to say a few words from the bottom of the heart of this old woman who has lived so much. If you are going through a situation like what I went through, know that you are not alone. No matter where you are, there are people ready to help, hands extended, waiting for you to hold them. Silence only protects the abusers. When I kept quiet about Ignatius's abuse, I only gave him strength. When I didn't notice the signs of what Richard was doing to Lena, I allowed evil to continue. Speaking up is difficult, it's frightening, but it's the first step to breaking the chains. You might think, "But no one will believe me," or, "It's dangerous, he'll hurt me more." I know how that fear is. I lived with it for years. But today I know there is always a way out, even when it seems we are cornered. In the darkest moments of my life, I found strength thinking of those I loved. Love was my fuel, my light in the darkness. Find yours. It can be any loved one, or even love for yourself, for that future you deserve to live without fear. Violence leaves scars, that's true. I carry mine on my body and soul. But scars are also marks of healing. They show where we were wounded, but prove that we survived, that the wound closed, that we moved forward. If you're listening to this and identify with my story, You are stronger than you think, more resilient than you imagine, braver than you believe, and you deserve a life of peace, of respect, of true love, not that distorted semblance that comes with fists and shouts. Anywhere in the world, seek help. Look for authorities, organizations that protect victims, trusted people. Use the internet to find information about how to protect yourself, a tool I didn't have in my time. And if you know someone who is suffering, extend your hand. Sometimes all a person in an abusive situation needs is to know they're not alone, that someone believes them, that there's a safe place to go. Be that someone. My story has pain, blood, tears. It has impossible choices and moments of despair. But it also has overcoming. It has new beginnings. In the end, it has a peace that I won hard. And if I, a simple woman from rural Kentucky with little education and many scars, managed to find my way out of darkness, you can too. And you, my dear ones who have accompanied me until here, before you leave, do this grandmother a favor. Click the subscribe button and activate the bell. By doing this, you help this story reach other people who might be going through the same thing, who need to hear that there is hope. When you subscribe, you're extending a hand to someone who may be suffering in silence at this very moment. And leave in the comments the word freedom, so I know who watched until the end. That word which I took so long to understand, which I fought so hard to conquer. Do this now. Don't wait one more minute. Your subscription could be the light someone is looking for in the darkness. Thank you for listening to me, for allowing me to share my pain and my redemption. May the cycle of violence stop with you, as it stopped with me. May your walls always be whole, without hidden holes. May your home be a place of love, of respect, of peace. That's the greatest blessing I can wish for you. When my husband came home unexpectedly and found me on the floor surrounded by our 15 children, I thought I would finally be saved. But he looked at the boys and said, "I leave for 1 week, and this is all you managed? She's still conscious." That's when I discovered that hell had 16 demons, not 15. Hello there, my dear ones. What a joy to have your company here with me this afternoon. Please make yourselves comfortable, grab a cup of coffee, because the story I'm going to tell you today is one of those that weighs heavy on the heart, but also teaches us so much about the strength we never knew we had inside us. My name is Rose Patterson, but you can just call me Rose. That's how everyone knows me here. I'm 76 years old, born and raised in a small town called Cedar Falls, there in rural Tennessee, right near the Kentucky border. You know those little places that have more cattle than people? Well, that was it. Today I still live here in Cedar Falls, in a simple little house full of love, very different from the life I had for many, many years. Every day I wake up early, when the rooster is still crowing at the neighbors, and the first thing I do is water my plants. I have a little garden in front of the house that's my pride and joy, honey. Roses, geraniums, snake plants to ward off the evil eye, those little things. After I finish taking care of my little plants, I make my coffee with cream, nice and hot, get my bread with butter, and sit there on the porch to watch the day break. It's in those moments, looking at the sky dawning, that I thank God for every day I live in peace. You know how I started this routine with plants? It was right after I managed to get out of that life I'm going to tell you about. I was living in a little rented room, alone for the first time in my life, not really knowing what to do with myself. A very good neighbor, Mrs. Teresa, gave me a little fern cutting and said, "Rose, take care of this little plant the way you should have been taken care of." I cried so much that day, honey, but I took care of that fern with all the love in the world. And when I saw it growing, sprouting new leaves, green and beautiful, I understood that I could bloom again too. Since then, I've never stopped growing my little plants. Today I have more than 30 little pots scattered around the house. I'm sitting here in my rocking chair, that wooden one that creaks nicely when you move. I have a crocheted blanket that I made myself covering my legs, because even in the heat here, this old lady already feels a little chill in her joints. On the side table, I have my rosary, my reading glasses, and a photograph of my grandchildren. Ah, the grandchildren I chose to have in my heart, not those by blood who caused me so much pain. I'll explain that better in a little bit. Before I continue, I'd like to make a special request to you watching me now. If Grandma Rose's story here is touching your heart, please subscribe to Grandparents' Tales and hit that like button, okay, my love? This helps so much so that other people who need to hear this message can also find me. And turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next videos from this doting grandma here. Oh, and tell me here in the comments. From what corner of America are you watching me? And at what time of day did you find this video from Grandma? Early in the morning with coffee, in the middle of the afternoon, or already in the evening after dinner? I read all the comments, believe me? And I get so happy knowing where you're from and when you take time to listen to this old lady's stories. Tell me, okay? Let's create a chain of love from north to south of this great country. Now, taking a deep breath here, I need to talk about the subject that brings me here today. My dear ones, for many years of my life, I lived in a big house on an isolated farm, married to a powerful man. I had 15 children. 15, can you imagine? But this wasn't a story of a happy, large family like you might be thinking. It was a story of survival, of silent pain, and of a day when everything changed, when I discovered a truth that broke my heart in half, but also gave me strength to be reborn. So grab another coffee there, get settled in your chair, because this story begins back in my girlhood days when I didn't even imagine what life had in store for me. I was born in 1949, right at the end of June, when winter was starting to bite here in rural Tennessee. My mother, Linda, used to say that it was so cold that night, and she was afraid I wouldn't make it. I was so tiny. But I did, thank God. I came into the world in our humble little house, with dirt floors and wooden walls, with the help of the village midwife, Mrs. Zoe, who smelled like medicinal herbs and had hands as steady as old tree roots. My father, Robert, was a traveling salesman. He spent more time on the road with his truck loaded with merchandise than at home with us. He carried coffee, beans, flour, sometimes cured ham, from here in Cedar Falls to neighboring towns. He was a man of few words, thin as a fishing rod, with skin weathered from so much sun. When he was home, he'd sit on the wooden stool at the kitchen door, roll a cigarette, and stay there smoking quietly, looking at nothing. He was never one for conversation, never one for affection, but he also never raised a hand to me or my siblings. He was just absent, you know, like we were part of the house's landscape, like the table, like the pots hanging on the wall. My mother was the opposite. Linda was all affection, all care, short, plump, with those red cheeks from living near the wood stove. She always wore a printed cotton dress, an apron over it, and a scarf tied on her head. She took care of everything, the house, the garden, the chickens, me and my 3 siblings. I was the second oldest. There was Robert Jr., who was 2 years older than me, then Linda Jr., 3 years younger, and finally Robert III, the baby, who was born when I was about 8 years old. You know what I noticed, honey? All of us carried our father's Robert or mother's Linda in our names. Robert, Linda, Robert Jr., Linda Jr. I, Rose, was the exception. My mother told me, years later, that she had insisted so much on giving me the name of her grandmother, Rose, who was Irish and had come to America on a ship when she was a young woman. My father had grumbled, but let it be. I think it was the only wish of my mother's that he respected in his whole life. We lived in a little house with only 3 rooms. There was the kitchen, which was where life happened, with the wood stove that my mother lit every day before sunrise. The smell of burning wood, of brewed coffee, of day-old bread heating on the griddle, that was the smell of my childhood. There was the living room, which we only used when visitors came, with 2 long wooden benches, a little table in the middle, and a picture of the Virgin Mary hanging on the wall, always with a little sprig of dried rosemary in front. And there was the bedroom, where we all slept piled together. My parents in a double bed that creaked, me and my sister Linda Jr. on a straw mattress on the floor, and my male siblings on another mattress on the other side. There was no door separating anything. We heard everything. Father's heavy breathing, his snoring, the low conversations in the early morning. I learned from an early age to sleep lightly, always alert. Our routine was simple and heavy. My mother woke up first, before the rooster crowed. I'd hear her getting up slowly, dragging her bare feet to the stove. Soon came the sound of wood being broken, the match striking, the fire starting to crackle. When the smell of coffee reached the bedroom, it was time to get up. I had to help Mother with breakfast, fetch water from the well, sift the cornmeal, feed the chickens. My sister Linda Jr. was still too small to help, so she'd play in the yard while my mother and I worked. After breakfast, which was just bread with lard and coffee with lots of brown sugar, I'd go to the backyard to help Mother wash clothes in the stone basin. That basin was cold, honey. The water came straight from the spring behind the hill, and it was so cold it left our fingers red and stiff. But we scrubbed anyway, with that ash soap Mother made, and wrung it hard until the clothes were almost dry. Then we'd hang them on the barbed wire line that Father had strung between two trees. Only around 10 in the morning, when the sun was already high, did I have a little time to play. I'd play with the neighborhood girls. There was Clara, Nancy, and Teresa, who were my best friends. We'd play house under the big persimmon tree that was on Mr. Walter's property, the neighbor. We'd make little stoves out of bricks, little pots from old tin cans, and food from leaves and dirt. Clara always wanted to be the mother because she was the most bossy. I was usually the oldest daughter who had to take care of the younger siblings. Funny how play imitated life, right? Other times, we'd play hide and seek in the middle of the cornfield that surrounded the houses. We'd run between the corn stalks, hide behind the trees, scream when we were caught. We'd come home all dirty with red dirt, with leaves in our hair, and get scolded by Mother. But it was worth it. Those were the only moments when I felt like a real child, you know? Light, free, without obligation. There was one day, I must have been about 7, when Clara and I found a bird's nest that had fallen on the ground. There were 3 little blue eggs inside, so perfect they looked painted. We were enchanted. We carefully took the nest to my house, and my mother helped us put it in a little box lined with cloth, near the stove to keep it warm. I spent days taking care of those little eggs, waiting for them to open. But they never opened. One day my mother explained, with that gentle voice of hers, that the birds inside had already died, that without the heat of the mother bird, there was no way to survive. I cried so much that day. I cried for the birds, but I think I also cried for a sadness I couldn't even explain properly at the time. When I turned 9, I started noticing things that had gone unnoticed before. I noticed that my mother was always tired, always with that expression of someone carrying an invisible weight. I noticed that when my father came back from trips, she became tense, spoke quietly, moved around the house on tiptoe as if she wanted not to be noticed. My brother Robert Jr. started to become like my father, quiet, serious, bossy with me and Linda Jr. He was only 11, but he already talked to us the way grown men talk to women, giving orders, expecting to be obeyed. One night, I must have been about 10, I woke up to a strange noise coming from my parents' room. It was my mother crying softly, in that muffled way of someone who doesn't want to be heard. I heard my father's voice, thick and irritated. "Shut that mouth, Linda! You're making a scene over nothing!" Then silence. I lay there on my straw mattress, with my heart tight, not knowing what to do. The next morning, my mother had a swollen eye. She said she had bumped into the closet door in the dark. But I was old enough to know that closet doors don't leave bruises like that. It was around this time that talks about my marriage began. I hadn't even turned 12 yet, but my mother was already talking, all excited, about a young man from town who had seen me at Mass and had asked my father about me. "He's a good man, Rose. He has land, he has cattle. He'll take good care of you." I didn't understand why I needed to marry so early. Clara was also already promised, Nancy too. It seemed like that's what they expected from us, to grow up fast, become someone's wife, take care of house and children. This young man was named Augustus. He was 28 when he met me. I was 11. He was tall, strong, with a thick mustache and the manner of someone who commands. He wore a white shirt always well pressed, a leather hat, and came to our house riding a bay horse that gleamed in the sun. He brought gifts for my mother, a piece of fabric, a pound of refined sugar, things we weren't used to having. My father became all-important when he appeared, offered coffee, made conversation about cattle and land business. Augustus looked at me in a way that made me uncomfortable. It wasn't the look of someone who sees a child. It was the look of someone who's evaluating, measuring, choosing. He'd smile, show his white teeth and say, "This girl is going to be a beautiful woman." And hard-working, just like her mother. My mother would be all proud. I'd just feel embarrassed, wanting to disappear. At 12 years old, my parents announced that I was going to marry Augustus as soon as I turned 13. They said it was a blessing, that I was going to have a good life, that I would never want for anything. My mother cried the day she told me, but they were tears of joy, she said. "You're going to have everything I never had, my daughter." A big house, pretty clothes, plenty of food. I wanted to ask, "And love, Mother?" And the desire to study, to know the world. But I didn't ask. Girls didn't ask those things back then. I married Augustus 3 days after my 13th birthday, on a Thursday morning, at the little church in Cedar Falls. It was July 1962, and it was bitterly cold. I remember I was shivering at the church door, but it wasn't just from the cold, my dear ones. It was from fear. Fear of leaving my mother's house, fear of that man I barely knew, fear of what was to come. I wore a white dress that my mother had sewn for weeks, working by lamplight after everyone went to sleep. It was simple, cotton, with some little embroidery on the hem and collar. My mother had cried when she dressed me that morning, arranging my hair pulled back in a bun that pulled at my scalp. "You look so beautiful, my daughter, so grown up." But when I looked in the broken little mirror she was holding, I saw only a scared girl with eyes too big for her thin face. The ceremony was quick. Father Oscar said some words in Latin that I didn't understand. Augustus put a thin ring on my finger. It was too big. It kept spinning. And that was it. I was a married woman. I was 13 years old and 2 weeks old. Augustus's farm was about 8 miles from my parents' house, in an even more isolated region. We got there by wagon in the middle of the afternoon. I remember the big wooden gate, the dirt road that went up between the pastures, and the house. My God in heaven, that house. It was huge compared to the little house where I grew up. It had 2 floors, 8 rooms, a porch in front and back. It was painted white with blue windows and had a huge yard surrounded by persimmon, guava, and lemon trees. "It's all yours now," Augustus said, with that manner of someone giving a valuable handout. "You're the lady of this house. You'll take good care of it, won't you?" I nodded, still dizzy from it all. Lady? I didn't feel like a lady of anything. I felt like a doll that had been moved from one shelf to another. In the first months, Augustus was different from what I expected. He wasn't affectionate, never was. But he also wasn't violent. He was just distant, busy. He'd wake up before sunrise, go out to take care of the cattle, the fences, negotiations with other farmers. He'd come back at night, eat in silence the dinner I prepared, with the help of Mrs. Eugenia, the old cook who already worked on the farm before me, and then sit on the porch to smoke and drink whiskey until bedtime. The nighttime part, honey. The nighttime part was what hurt me most. He'd enter the room, blow out the lamp, and do what a husband does with his wife. But there was no conversation, no care. It was mechanical, quick, painful. I'd lie there, looking at the dark ceiling, waiting for it to end. When it ended, he'd turn over and sleep. I'd stay awake, with my hands gripping the sheet, feeling my whole body ache, and crying softly until sleep came. At 14, I got pregnant with my first child. Augustus was happy in a way I had never seen. He called his friends to celebrate, killed a pig, made barbecue. "It's going to be a boy," he announced to everyone, beating his chest. "It's going to be my heir." I secretly hoped it would be a girl. I thought that if it was a girl, maybe he'd be less interested, would leave me alone for a while. But a boy was born. In May 1964, after labor that lasted almost 20 hours, little Augustus was born. Just like that, little Augustus. They didn't even ask me what name I wanted to give. Augustus decided, and that was it. When they put that little baby in my arms, I felt something strange. It was my son, had come from inside me, but at the same time seemed to belong more to the father than to me. Augustus would pick him up, lift him for everyone to see, say, "This one here is going to be strong like his father. He's going to command all this land someday." I barely finished my postpartum period and was already pregnant again. And again. And again. Between 1964 and 1978, I had 15 children. 15. 13 boys and 2 girls. All the names chosen by Augustus, Augustus Jr. Edward, Walter, Edgar, Ronald, Claude, Adam, Joseph, Edison, Walden, the girls Edith and Valerie, and then 3 more boys, Claude Jr., Edmund, and Reginald. With each child that was born, my body became more tired, more worn. I had deep stretch marks on my belly, sagging breasts from so much nursing, my back aching constantly. At 29, I looked like I was 50. Mrs. Eugenia, poor thing, tried to help me. She'd make herbal tea to give strength, massage my back, take care of the boys while I rested. "You need to tell your husband to stop, child," she'd whisper. "Your body can't take any more." But how could I talk? A husband wasn't to be contradicted. He was to be obeyed. Augustus governed the house with an iron fist. He had rules for everything. Coffee had to be on the table at exactly 6 in the morning. His shirt had to be ironed without a wrinkle. The children had to be quiet when he was home. "I don't want to hear noise from brats," he'd say. "If I hear it, you're the one who gets it." And he kept his word. Any crying, any running around, any fight between the boys, I was the one who got scolded. Sometimes just scolding, the kind that humiliates, that makes you feel smaller than an ant. Other times, when he had been drinking more, it was slaps, hair pulling, pushing against the wall. But the worst, my dear ones, the worst wasn't even what he did to me. It was what he was teaching our children. I saw, clear as day, the seed he was planting in those boys. From little on, he repeated, "Men command, women obey. Men are strong, women are weak. You have to put authority in your house, or it becomes chaos." Augustus Jr., the oldest, at 8 years old, already talked to me the way his father talked. "Mom, bring my plate here." "Mom, did you heat my bathwater?" He didn't ask. He ordered. When the boys reached 10, 12 years old, it got worse. They began to imitate their father in everything. In the way they walked, in the way they talked, in the way they looked at me. It was as if I stopped being a mother and became a maid. Or worse. I became an object that was there to serve, to clean, to cook, to get beaten when things didn't go the way they wanted. There was something that happened, and that took me a while to understand properly. Augustus traveled a lot. He had cattle business in several cities in the region. He'd go to Asheville, to Knoxville, to Bristol. Sometimes he'd be gone for a week. I thought that when he left, the house would be lighter, calmer. In the first years, it even was. But as the boys grew up, everything changed. The first time I noticed something was very wrong was when Augustus Jr. was about 15. His father had traveled on Monday to Knoxville, was only coming back on Saturday. On Tuesday morning, I was in the kitchen preparing lunch, beans, rice, stewed pork. The older boys, Augustus Jr., Edward, Walter, and Edgar, came into the kitchen all together. They had an expression on their faces that gave me chills. "Mom, Dad said that when he's not here, we're the ones who command here," Augustus Jr. said, crossing his arms. He was already bigger than me, strong, with the face of a grown man. "Of course, my son," I replied, stirring the pot. You're the men of the house when Dad's not here. You can rest assured that I'll take care of everything properly. It's not that, Edward continued. He was 13. We don't just want you to take care. We want you to obey, just like you obey Dad. My heart started beating faster. But I do obey, my son. Don't I obey? That's when Augustus Jr. came close. So close I could smell his sweat. You talked back to Dad last week. We heard. You said you were tired. Dad didn't like it. He paused, and his eyes became hard. We're not going to tolerate disrespect either. Before I could respond, Walter took the wooden spoon from my hand. Go to the living room. We want to talk to you. It wasn't a request. It was an order. My boys, whom I had carried in my womb, whom I had nursed, whom I had rocked to sleep, were giving me orders as if they were my owners. I went to the living room with trembling legs. They surrounded me. 4 boys, teenagers, looking down at me, making me feel small. And there, that Tuesday afternoon, with the sun coming through the window cracks and the smell of lunch burning on the stove that I left unattended, my children taught me the first lesson of what would be my life from then on. Augustus Jr. spoke for almost an hour. He said that while Dad was away, they were responsible for maintaining discipline in the house, that I had to obey them the same way I obeyed Dad, that if I failed in any task, they would correct me the way Dad corrected. The other 3 stood there, around, nodding, agreeing with every word. When they finished talking, they sent me back to the kitchen. The beans had overflowed, the meat had stuck to the bottom of the pan. I cleaned everything crying, with my hands shaking so much I broke a plate. The sound of the plate shattering on the floor echoed through the entire house. Seconds later, I heard heavy footsteps coming toward the kitchen. Mom's breaking things now? Edward said from the door, with that tone that chilled my soul. I guess she hasn't learned yet. And that's when, my dear ones, at that moment, with my children looking at me that way, I understood. Hell had just begun. But the worst was yet to come. The worst would be discovering where they had learned exactly what to do to me when Dad wasn't around. The years that followed were the darkest of my life, my dear ones. If I could erase some piece of my memory, it would be this period between 1979 and 1985. But you can't erase it, right? It stays there, engraved in one's soul, heavy as a stone in the chest. The system my children created was simple and cruel. Every time Augustus traveled, and he traveled more and more, sometimes twice a month, the boys took control of the house. In the beginning, it was just the 4 oldest, Augustus Jr., Edward, Walter, and Edgar. But as the others grew up, they joined the group too. When it got to 1983, there were already 9 teenage and grown boys living in that house. 9 against 1. They had rules, absurd rules that changed according to their will. One day, I had to serve lunch at exactly noon. If I was 5 minutes late, there was a consequence. Another day, they decided that clothes had to be ironed and folded in a specific way, with the fold turned in, not out. If I made a mistake, there was a consequence. The dishes had to be washed and put away before 8 at night. The porch floor had to be swept 3 times a day. The food couldn't have too much salt, nor too little salt. It had to be at the exact point they liked. And you know what the consequence was, honey. It was what they called a correction session. They'd call me to the living room, the same living room where I had received visits from my mother years ago, where there were pictures of saints on the wall, where it should be a family place. But that living room had become my tribunal. They'd sit on the benches and chairs, forming a semicircle. I'd stand in the middle. Augustus Jr., who was the leader, always started. Mom, you failed today. Do you know where you failed? Sometimes I knew, sometimes I didn't. But my answer didn't matter. They had already decided what my punishment would be. It started with words, humiliations. You're incompetent. You're not even good enough to take care of a house. Dad should have married another woman, one who was worth something. Each word was like a slap. I'd stand there, head down, biting my lip not to cry, because if I cried, they'd say I was being dramatic, and then it would get worse. After the words came the physical punishments, slaps with shoes. They'd take off their shoes and hit, on my back, on my legs, on my arms. They didn't hit my face because it would leave marks, and when Dad came back, he would see. They had this care, you know? This cold calculation of how to hurt without leaving visible evidence. Belt lashes, too. Edward was the one who most liked using belts. He'd wrap the end around his hand and crack it in the air before hitting my back. The sound alone made me tremble before the pain even came. There was one time, it was winter of 1981, when I burned the beans. I was so tired that day, I had spent the night awake with Reginald who had a fever, that I ended up dozing off standing up, leaning on the kitchen counter, while the beans cooked. When I woke up to the smell of burning, it was too late. The pot had stuck, the beans had turned to charcoal. The boys called me to the living room. There were 7 that day. The older ones were already 20, 19, 17 years old. Grown men, strong. When I entered the living room and saw them all there, I felt my legs weaken. "You burned the food," Augustus Jr. said, with that cold voice he had learned from his father. "We're going to go without lunch because of you. Do you think that's fair?" "No, my son. Sorry. I'll make another one. I'll make another one real quick," I begged. "You're not going to make anything," Walter replied. "You're going to learn not to waste food." He got the burned pot from the kitchen, still smoking, and put it in front of me. "Eat it." I looked at him without understanding. "What do you mean, my son?" "Eat the burned beans. Since you made it, you eat it." My dear ones, I tried to explain that I couldn't, that it was too burned, that it would make me sick, but they insisted, and when I refused, they got the shoe. They beat me so much that day that I couldn't lie on my back for 3 days. Mrs. Eugenia, poor thing, cried while putting ointment on my wounds. "This isn't right, Miss Rose. This is no way for a son to treat his mother." But what could we do? She was an employee. I was a hostage. Neither of us had anywhere to run. The worst of all, and this hurts me to tell even today, was seeing my 2 daughters growing up in the middle of that. Edith and Valerie, my girls. I prayed every day that they would stay blind to that violence, that they wouldn't get used to it. But how could they not get used to it, right? They saw their brothers treating me that way, saw their father treating me that way, and learned that that's how it worked. That men command, women bow their heads. Edith, when she turned 15, was promised to a farmer from Bristol, a 40-year-old man, widower, with 3 children. I tried to talk to her, tried to warn her. "My daughter, don't accept this marriage. Run away, go live with your aunt in Nashville." But she looked at me with contempt. "Mom, you're weak. I'm not going to be weak like you. I'm going to marry a good man and be respected." She married in 1982, and I never heard from her again. They say she disappeared a few years later. To this day, I don't know if she's alive or dead. Valerie left home at 16, ran away with a trucker who passed through the region. She left a note under my pillow. "Mom, sorry, but I can't stand this house anymore. I'd rather take my chances out there than stay here." When the boys discovered she had run away, guess who got beaten? Me, as if I was to blame for my daughter escaping the hell they themselves had created. The isolation was complete. I couldn't leave the farm. There was no telephone, no car, no way to ask for help. My mother had died in 1980 from a stroke. When I went to the funeral, I came back knowing I had lost the only person in the world who truly cared about me. My father had already died years before. My siblings had their own lives, their own problems. No one knew what happened inside that big, beautiful house, surrounded by fruit trees and green pasture. From the outside, it was paradise. Inside, it was hell. There was one day that marked me a lot, my dear ones. It was Augustus Jr.'s birthday, in May 1984. He was turning 20. Augustus had come back from a trip just for the celebration. We killed a steer, made barbecue, invited half the town. The house was full of people, music, laughter. I served everyone, brought beer, brought meat, cleaned tables. Nobody noticed I was limping. I had gotten a belt lash on my thigh 2 days before because Edward's clothes hadn't dried in time. At the end of the night, when they were all drunk, Augustus Jr. stood on a chair and made a speech. He talked about his father, about how he was a man of respect, an example. He talked about his brothers, about how they were united and strong. And then he looked at me. And I thanked my mother, who always took care of us, who always kept the house in order. Everyone applauded. I forced a smile, waved. Inside, I was bleeding. Later that night, when the guests left, Augustus called me to the room. I thought he was going to want what a husband wants. But no. He sat on the edge of the bed, lit a cigarette, and said, "You're too thin, Rose. You look sick." People commented. "That makes me look bad, understand? You need to take better care of yourself." I stayed quiet. He continued. "And the boys said, you've been failing in your duties when I'm not here. That can't continue. I can't travel worried, thinking the house is going to become chaos." I took a deep breath and risked, "Augustus, the boys. They're very hard on me. They treat me badly when you leave." He took a long drag on his cigarette, looked at me, and laughed. It wasn't a laugh of joy. It was a laugh of scorn. "Hard. Rose, they're men. Men need to learn to command, and you need to learn to obey, which is your role." He put out the cigarette in the ashtray and got up. "If you can't handle it, that's your problem. Straighten yourself out." That night, lying in the dark, I understood something terrible. There was no salvation. There was nowhere to run. There was nobody who would listen to me. The whole world thought I had a blessed life. Married to a rich man, 15 healthy children, big house. Who would believe that inside those walls I was less than nothing? That my own children, whom I had generated and raised, treated me like a work animal that gets beaten when it doesn't work properly? I began to have bad thoughts, thoughts of ending it all at once. I'd look at the deep well in the yard and think, would there be time to fill my lungs with water before someone pulled me out? I'd look at the big knife in the kitchen and think, would it hurt a lot? But then came the guilt, the religion my mother had put in my head since I was little. Suicide is a mortal sin, Rose. Those who kill themselves go to hell. And I thought, I'm already in hell. Could there be one worse than this? In 1985, I was 36, but looked 60. My hair had started to turn gray, my teeth were falling out. I had already lost 3. My skin was yellowish, full of purple spots that never completely disappeared. I weighed 95 pounds. Mrs. Eugenia forced me to eat, put the plate in front of me, and stayed there until I finished. You need strength, Miss Rose. You need to endure. Endure for what? I thought. But I ate, mechanically, without tasting anything. It was that year that the worst happened. The moment that, to this day, when I close my eyes, still makes me tremble. It was a Saturday afternoon. August, chilly. Augustus had traveled on Thursday, was only coming back on Monday. The boys had invented a new rule. I couldn't sit during the day. I had to stay standing, working all the time. If they caught me sitting, I got shoe lashes. I was exhausted. I had spent the dawn washing clothes. They dirtied clothes on purpose, I'm sure, just to give me more work. My legs were swollen, the varicose veins throbbing with pain. At 3 in the afternoon, I couldn't take it. I sat on a little stool in the kitchen just for a minute, just to rest. I closed my eyes, and sleep came quickly, in that heavy way of someone who's at their limit. I woke up to a scream. It was Joseph, one of the middle ones, who had entered the kitchen and seen me sleeping, sitting down. "Look at this. The lazy one is sleeping on the job," he called the others. They all came. 11 boys, because the 3 youngest were still children and were playing outside. 11 of my children surrounded me in that kitchen. "Are you making fun of us, Mom?" Augustus Jr. said, and there was real anger in his eyes. We make rules, you ignore them. We correct, you don't learn. I think we've been too soft. He looked at his brothers. Today she's going to learn for real. My dear ones, what happened that afternoon I won't describe in detail because it still makes me sick to remember. But I'll say that I screamed so much my voice went hoarse, that Mrs. Eugenia locked herself in the back room and prayed the whole rosary out loud so she wouldn't hear my screams. That when it was over, I was on the kitchen floor, curled up, with my whole body aching, my mouth bleeding, and with the certainty that I was going to die there, in that house, and nobody was going to cry for me. But I didn't die. The body endures more than we imagine, you know? I stayed in bed for 3 days. Mrs. Eugenia took care of me, hid from the boys that I couldn't get up. She told them I had a fever, a bad flu, that I needed rest. They didn't even care. While I was bedridden, they ate the food Mrs. Eugenia made and thought it was great not having to put up with my incompetence. When Augustus came back on Monday, I had already dragged myself out of bed. I was standing, preparing dinner, pretending everything was fine. He didn't even ask how the week had been. He ate, praised the food, and went to the porch to smoke. Another normal week at the horror farm. It was after that episode that something began to change inside me. It wasn't hope, no. I didn't have hope anymore. It was anger. A cold anger kept deep inside. An anger that said, I'm not going to die here. I'm not going to give them that pleasure. I didn't know yet how I was going to get out of there, but I knew that someday, somehow, I was leaving, even if it was the last act of my life. September 1985 arrived with that dry heat that leaves the earth cracked and the throat rough. It had been 3 weeks since that terrible episode in the kitchen, and I still felt pain in my ribs when I breathed deeply. But I kept standing, kept working, kept surviving. That's all I knew how to do. Survive one more day. Augustus had traveled again, this time to Knoxville, to resolve a land deed issue. He said it would take a week, maybe 10 days. When I heard this, my stomach churned. 10 days. 10 days alone with them. 10 days of correction sessions, of humiliations, of pain. I prayed quietly. God, give me strength. Just that. Just strength to endure. The first days were as always, absurd rules, endless work, punishments for any little thing. On Tuesday, Claude said his shirt smelled bad. It didn't. I had washed it properly, ironed it, folded it. But he said it did, so it did. I took 3 shoe lashes. On Wednesday, Walden thought the meat at lunch was tough. I got more shoe lashes and went without eating, as punishment for wasting good food. On Thursday, Edison tripped over a broom I had left leaning against the wall. Are you trying to kill me, Mom? Want me to break my face? He yelled. And there I went to the living room again. But it was on Friday that everything changed. It was on Friday that the last straw fell and the glass that was already cracked shattered completely. It was late afternoon, the sun was already setting, painting the sky that orange-purple that always reminded me of my childhood. I was in the kitchen, finishing washing the dinner dishes. My hands were red and swollen from the hot water, my nails broken from so much pot scrubbing. Mrs. Eugenia had left early. She lived in a little house in the back of the farm. But on Fridays, she visited her sister in town and only came back Saturday morning. The boys were all in the living room, playing cards and drinking beer. I heard their laughter, their shouts when someone won the round. It seemed like a normal gathering of brothers, you know? If someone from outside saw it, they'd think it was nice. United family, having fun. Nobody would imagine what happened in that house. I finished the dishes, dried my hands on the apron, and went to the living room to say I was going to sleep. I always did this, asked permission to sleep, as if I were a child and they were my parents. Excuse me, my children. May I go rest? Augustus Jr. looked at me over his cards. He had a strange expression on his face, a mixture of amusement and cruelty. Wait a minute, Mom. We want to talk to you. My heart raced. Talking was never a good sign. "What is it, my son?" He put down his cards on the table and got up. The others did the same, one by one, until they were all standing, surrounding me. There were 10 that night. Reginald, the youngest, was sleeping. 10 grown men, strong, tall, and me, small, thin, tired. "We were talking here," Edward began, "and we think you're getting too relaxed. You're failing too much. Every day there's something wrong." "I try hard, my son. I swear that—" "Shut up," Walter cut me off. "We didn't ask anything. We're talking. You listen." I stayed silent, trembling. Augustus Jr. continued. "We decided that today the correction is going to be different, more educational, so you learn once and for all." That's when Edgar left the room and came back carrying a bucket. A bucket full of water. My dear ones, when I saw that bucket, something inside me screamed, "Danger." "What are you going to do?" I asked, and my voice came out thin, scared. "Nothing much, Mom," Augustus Jr. said, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You're just going to kneel here, holding this bucket, until we decide you've learned. It seems like little, right? A bucket of water. But my dear ones, that bucket was heavy. And staying kneeling on the hard wooden floor, with knees that already ached from so much work, with arms stretched out holding the weight. It was torture. I knelt down. I took the bucket. I stretched my arms forward as they ordered. At first I could handle it. But after 5 minutes, my arms began to tremble. After 10, the pain was like fire going up from my wrists to my shoulders. After 15, I was crying, begging, "Please, my children, I can't take it anymore." "Yes, you can," Edward said, drinking his beer calmly. "Women can take a lot. You say so yourself." When the bucket fell, because it fell, my arms couldn't hold it anymore. The water spread all over the floor. The boys exploded. "Look what you did! You wet everything! Now you're going to have to clean it up." They gave me a rag and told me to dry the floor. Still on my knees, dragging the soaked rag, scrubbing each board. My tears dripped on the floor along with the water from the bucket. I was at my limit, at my absolute limit. And it was there, in that moment, drying that floor, hearing my children's laughter, that I had a thought I had never had before. A clear, crystalline thought that cut through all the confusion in my mind. I'd rather die trying to get out of here than die inside here. I finished cleaning. They sent me to the kitchen to make fresh coffee. I went, with wobbly legs, with my whole body aching. I put the water to boil, put the powder in the filter, and while the coffee dripped, I held onto the edge of the stove and thought, how? How do I get out of here? I had no money. I had nowhere to go. I didn't know anyone who could help me. All my family had died or disappeared. The neighbors were Augustus's friends. The whole town respected him and thought I was lucky to be his wife. If I ran away, they'd look for me. They'd bring me back. And then, God in heaven, what would they do to me? I took the coffee to the living room. I served each one. When I got close to Augustus Jr., my hand trembled, and I spilled a little on the table. It was by accident. I swear to God it was by accident. But he didn't care about that. He jumped up, took the still hot cup, and threw the rest of the coffee on my blouse. I screamed in pain. The coffee burned my belly, my chest. I ran to the kitchen, tore off my blouse, threw cold water. My skin was red, burning. I collapsed on the floor right there and sobbed so loudly I couldn't stop. All the pain of those years came out at once. I screamed, hit the floor with my fists, spit out words I had never had the courage to say. God, why? Why did you abandon me? Why did you let me suffer so much? I can't take it anymore. I can't. Mrs. Eugenia wasn't there to console me. The boys didn't come to see if I was okay. I stayed alone on the cold kitchen floor with my burned skin, my beaten body, my shattered soul. And it was there, in my darkest moment, that something strange happened. I remembered my mother. Not a common memory, no. It was as if she was there with me. I remembered the day she taught me to plant beans in the garden when I was very little. She had said, "Look, Rose, the seed needs to stay in the dark earth, needs to be crushed, needs to almost die. But that's where new life is born. It's from the bottom of the ground that the little plant comes." Could that be it? Could it be that I needed to reach rock bottom to be able to climb up? Could it be that God hadn't abandoned me but was waiting for me to find strength I didn't even know I had? I got up from that floor. I washed my face in cold water. I put ointment on the burn. I put on another blouse. And I made a decision. I was leaving. I didn't know when, I didn't know how, but I was. I was going to wait for the right moment. I was going to gather strength, and I was leaving. Even if I died trying. In the following days, I began to pay attention to things I had never paid attention to. Where Augustus kept the money. When the boys slept most soundly. Which door creaked less? I began to hide food, a piece of bread here, a banana there, wrapped in a cloth and hidden under the mattress. I began to think about routes. If I left at dawn by the back road, could I get to the village before sunrise? I told Mrs. Eugenia. On a Sunday morning, when the boys had gone fishing and I was helping her peel cassava, I whispered, "Mrs. Eugenia, I'm leaving." She stopped peeling and looked at me with those old, wise eyes. "When?" "I don't know yet, but I'm going. Will you not turn me in?" She held my hand tightly. "I pray every day for you to have the courage to go, child. And when you go, I'll say I didn't see anything, that I woke up and you had disappeared. But be careful. They're dangerous." "I know," I said, "but staying here is more dangerous." Augustus came back the following Sunday. 10 days of travel. He was tired, dirty from the road, with that smell of sweat and cigarette smoke. He entered the house, greeted his sons, and went straight to take a bath. I prepared dinner, country chicken with rice and cornbread, the way he liked it. The table was set, the food was good, everything was right. We ate in silence. After dinner, he went to the porch to smoke. I started washing the dishes. My mind was racing. Can I leave this week, or should I wait a little longer? What if it goes wrong? What if they catch me? I was so lost in my thoughts that I didn't hear when he entered the kitchen. I only noticed when he spoke, right behind me. "Rose, the boys said you need correction." I froze. I turned slowly. He was there, leaning against the doorframe, with his arms crossed and that expression I knew so well. I've been trying hard, Augustus. I swear I have." "That's not what they say," he replied. "They say you're talking back, lazy, incompetent." He took a step toward me. "I think I've been too soft with you." And it was at that moment, my dear ones, that I did something I had never done. Something that sealed my fate once and for all. I looked him in the eyes and said, "I can't take it anymore, Augustus. Can't take you anymore. Can't take them anymore. You're killing me a little bit every day." The silence that followed was heavy as lead. Augustus stared at me, processing what I had just said. And then, to my surprise, he laughed. But it wasn't a laugh of joy. It was the laugh of someone who had just discovered something very interesting. "Really?" he said, dripping venom. "Then tomorrow, when I leave again, I'm going to Asheville to resolve some business. You're going to have the chance to show the boys how well you endure." He came closer, until I could smell his breath on my face. "And when I come back, we'll talk about that loose tongue of yours." He left the kitchen. I stood there, shaking. What had I done? Why had I opened my mouth? Now they were going to be worse. Now. But something inside me had changed. I had told the truth. For the first time in more than 20 years of marriage, I had spoken what I felt. And no matter the price I was going to pay, I had already decided anyway. I was leaving. I was going to wait for him to travel, wait for an opportunity, and leave. I didn't know that the opportunity would come faster than I imagined. I didn't know that Augustus himself was going to hand me, without meaning to, the key to my liberation. And I didn't know that before leaving, I would discover a truth so terrible that it would change everything I thought I knew about that house and that family. On Monday morning, Augustus left for Asheville. He said it would take about 5 days. He had to resolve document issues, sign papers at the notary. When his truck disappeared around the bend in the road, raising that red dust that took a while to settle, I breathed deeply. 5 days. I had 5 days to endure another round of torture with my children, and then I was leaving. I spent that Monday and Tuesday preparing everything. I hid more food. I already had about 3-day-old breads, 2 bananas, a piece of cheese wrapped in cloth. I took an old cloth bag and hid it under the mattress, along with a change of clothes. At night, when everyone was asleep, I'd stay awake planning. I was going to leave at dawn on Saturday. The boys always drank a lot on Friday night, slept late on Saturday. I'd have time to get far before they noticed I had disappeared. Mrs. Eugenia helped me the way she could. On Wednesday morning, she gave me a little money she had saved. It wasn't much. It was 20 old crumpled dollars. But she said, "Take it, my daughter. God knows I wish I could give you more, but it's what I have." I cried, hugging her. "You're the only good person in this house," I said. She squeezed my face with her calloused hands and replied, "You're good too, Miss Rose. Too good for these people. Go and don't look back." The boys during those days were worse than ever. It was as if they knew Dad was going to take longer this time and wanted to take advantage. On Tuesday, they made me kneel on corn. They scattered hard corn kernels on the porch floor and made me kneel there for an hour. My knees bled, turned purple, swollen. On Wednesday, Walden invented that the soup had no salt, threw the plate on the floor, and told me to clean it. With my tongue. My dear ones, I cleaned it. I licked that filthy floor, swallowing humiliation along with dirt and spilled soup, because I knew 3 more days. Just 3 more days, and I'd never have to do this again. Thursday came. I woke up with a strange weight in my chest, a bad feeling I couldn't explain. I prayed more than usual, asked for protection from Our Lady. I made coffee, fed the boys, washed clothes, swept the house. Normal routine. But that weight wouldn't go away. It was noon when it happened. I was in the kitchen, preparing lunch, cowboy beans with sausage, white rice, sautéed collard greens. Mrs. Eugenia was next to me, cutting the collard greens very thin, the way the boys liked. We were talking quietly about silly things, the weather getting warmer, the persimmon tree that was loaded with fruit. Normal things that made me forget, for a minute, the hell I lived in. The boys were all in the living room. I heard their noise, laughter, loud conversations, someone pushing furniture. They were having their discipline session, as they called it. Only this time, it wasn't with me. It was with Reginald, the youngest, who was 11 and had been caught stealing candy from the pantry. They were teaching him not to steal. I heard the boys crying, the older brothers shouting. My heart bled, but what could I do? If I interfered, they'd be worse with him, and with me too. Suddenly, the noise stopped. Complete silence. I found it strange. I looked at Mrs. Eugenia. She looked at me. "What could it be?" she whispered. I didn't have time to answer. We heard heavy footsteps on the back porch, the one that led straight to the kitchen. Boot steps. Only one person wore boots like that. Augustus. The door opened. He entered the kitchen, sweaty, with clothes dusty from travel, hat in hand. His eyes swept the environment, me, Mrs. Eugenia, the pots on the stove. Then he looked toward the living room, from where the absolute silence still came. My heart raced. A part of me, that part that still had hope, still believed in miracles, thought, "Thank God, he came back. He's going to see what the boys were doing. He's going to see that they're violent, that they hurt me, that this house has become hell. He's going to save me." Augustus walked slowly toward the living room. I dropped the spoon I was using to stir the beans and went after him with wobbly legs. Mrs. Eugenia tried to hold me back. "Don't go, Miss Rose," she whispered hurriedly. But I had already gone. When I got to the living room door, I saw the scene. Reginald huddled in a corner with a swollen eye and bleeding nose. The other 11 sons forming a semicircle, some holding shoes, others holding belts. All frozen, looking at their father with an expression of shock. They had been caught in the act. The silence was so heavy you could hear each person's breathing. I was standing there at the door, holding on to the doorframe, waiting for Augustus to explode with anger, waiting for him to yell, "Hit the boys, defend me, defend Reginald, end that madness once and for all." Augustus looked at each son, slowly. Then he looked at Reginald crying in the corner. Then he looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes that made me tremble all over. It wasn't surprise. It wasn't anger at the boys. It was disappointment. Disappointment with them, not with me. He turned to Augustus Jr., the oldest, and said with a low, cold voice that cut my soul like a knife, "I leave for 1 week, and this is all you managed?" It seemed like time stopped. I hadn't understood properly what he meant. Augustus Jr. also seemed confused. "Dad?" Augustus pointed to Reginald. "You're wasting time with a brat? Let the kid learn on his own." He paused, and then looked at me, and what came next destroyed my soul. "Where is she? Where's their mother? Why are you leaving her there in the kitchen, calm, when I left you in charge?" My dear ones, it was at that moment that the ground opened up under my feet. It was at that moment that I understood. It wasn't my children who created the abuse system. It was him, Augustus, my husband, their father. He had taught them. He had ordered them. He had created it all on purpose. "But Dad," Edward tried to explain, "we corrected her yesterday. She's obeying properly." "She's obeying?" Augustus raised his voice for the first time, and everyone cowered. He walked to where I was, pulled me by the arm, dragged me to the middle of the room. I stumbled, tried to balance myself, but he was too strong. He threw me on the floor, there in the middle of that semicircle of children. "Look at her! Look!" The boys looked. I was on my knees on the floor, with my hands resting on the boards, breathing fast, with fear, with pain, with horror. "She's still conscious," Augustus said, and there was contempt in his voice. Pure contempt. "She's still standing, walking, cooking, as if nothing had happened. Do you think this is discipline? Do you think I taught you to go easy?" He turned to Augustus Jr. "You're the oldest. You're responsible when I'm not here, and you're failing. You're letting her boss you around. You're letting her get comfortable." He spat the word comfortable as if it were a curse. I began to tremble, to cry. Not from sadness, from pure horror. Because finally, after all those years, I had understood. My children weren't monsters despite their father. They were monsters because of their father. They weren't rebelling against him. They were obeying him. "Dad, we tried," Walter began. "Tried?" Augustus interrupted. "If you had really tried, she wouldn't be standing here now. She'd be in bed, or better yet, in the hospital." He turned to me, stared at me with hate. "You're enjoying this, aren't you, Rose? You're enjoying seeing my sons fail? You're thinking they're weak, that they won't be able to dominate you? Augustus, please!" I tried to speak, but he cut me off with a shout. "Shut up!" He looked at his sons again. "You'll never be real men if you don't learn this. A woman needs to know her place, and her place is on the ground, serving with fear. If she's not afraid, you're not doing it right." He took the belt from Edgar's waist. "I'm going to show you how it's done, and you're going to learn. Now." My dear ones, what happened in the following minutes I won't describe. Not because I don't remember. I remember every second, every pain, every humiliation, but because some things are too heavy to put into words. What I'll say is that Augustus taught his children while I was there on the floor. He taught where to hit, what to say, how to humiliate. It was a class, a torture class. And my children watched, learned, absorbed every word as if it were gospel. When it was over, I could barely move. I stayed there on the floor, waiting to die, waiting for that pain to stop somehow. I heard Augustus's voice, distant, talking to his sons. Now you know. When I travel again, I want you to do exactly this. No going easy, no pity. She needs to understand that here you're the ones who command, and that you learned from me. Yes, Dad. I heard the chorus of voices responding. Footsteps walking away, door slamming, silence. I stayed there, alone in the living room, with my whole body aching, but with a clarity in my mind I had never had before. There weren't 16 demons in that house. There were 15 children and one master demon who had created all the others in his image and likeness. I don't know how long I stayed there. It could have been minutes, could have been hours. When I managed to drag myself to the kitchen, Mrs. Eugenia was sitting in the chair, crying. I heard everything, my daughter. I heard everything. She helped me sit, gave me water, cleaned my face with a damp cloth. Mrs. Eugenia, I said, and my voice came out firm despite everything. I'm leaving today, tonight. But you're not in condition. It doesn't matter, I cut her off. If I stay one more day, I'll die. Either they kill me or I kill myself. I'm leaving today. She held my hand. Then I'm going to help you. We spent the rest of the day planning. Augustus had left again. He went to town to resolve something, said he'd be back at night. The boys had gone to take care of the cattle. They'd only be back at the end of the afternoon. It was our chance. Mrs. Eugenia helped me get the bag I had hidden. We put in the food, the change of clothes, the little money. She gave me a few more coins she found saved in an old can. It's not much, but it's what I have. She also gave me a wool blanket. It's going to be cold at night. Cover yourself well. And you? I asked. They're going to blame you. Leave that to me, she said. I'm old. They're not going to do anything to me. And if they do, at least I'll die knowing I saved a life. When the sun began to set and the boys came back from the pasture, I acted normal. I prepared dinner, polenta with meat sauce. I served. They ate, talked among themselves, ignored me. It was as if what had happened in the morning was routine. Normalcy. And for them, it was. After dinner, I did everything I always did. I washed dishes, tidied the kitchen, swept the floor. When I finished, I said goodbye without saying goodbye. Good night, my children. Nobody responded. I went to the room, lay in bed, waited. Midnight. I got up without making noise. I took the bag from under the mattress. I put on my old shoes. I put on a coat over my clothes. I looked at the bed where I had slept for more than 20 years. I looked at the room where I had been violated, humiliated, destroyed, and I whispered, never again. I left through the back door, the one that led straight to the yard. The night was dark, without a moon. Better that way. Nobody would see me. I walked very slowly through the yard, passing by the fruit trees, by the chicken coop, until I reached the back fence. I jumped. Everything hurt, but I jumped. On the other side, the dirt road, the road that led far away. I began to walk, fast. Each step was pain in my beaten body, but it was also freedom. Each meter left behind was one more meter of distance from that hell. I walked, walked, walked. I didn't look back even once. If I looked, I was afraid I'd lose courage. When the sun began to dawn on the horizon, I was already far, about 5, 6 miles. I didn't know exactly where I was going. I just knew I was going far. Far from Augustus. Far from my children. Far from that cursed farm. I walked until I reached a small village. I don't remember the name. There was a church. I sat on the church steps and cried. I cried everything I hadn't cried in those years. I cried from pain, from relief, from fear, from hope. I cried until I had no more tears. It was there that a lady found me. She was going to open the church for 6 o'clock Mass. She saw me sitting there all bruised with a bag on my back and asked, "My daughter, are you okay? Do you need help?" I looked at her. She was a lady of about 60, short, with a kind face, and I told the truth. I ran away. I ran away from home. I have nowhere to go. She didn't ask anything else. She just said, "Come with me." This lady was named Teresa. She took me to her house, a simple little house with 3 rooms in the village. She gave me food, gave me a bath, gave me a clean bed. And when I told my story, not everything, but enough, she cried with me. "You were very brave, my daughter, very brave." I stayed at Mrs. Teresa's house for 3 months. She hid me, protected me. I learned later that Augustus sent people to look for me. They went to the city, asked everywhere. But nobody knew anything. Nobody turned me in. After 3 months, with Mrs. Teresa's help, I got a job as a domestic worker in a bigger city, even farther away. That's how I started over, from scratch. With the clothes on my back, traumas in my soul, but with something I hadn't had for a long time: freedom. The surprise of that day, Augustus coming back, Augustus showing that everything had been planned by him, wasn't just discovering the truth. It was discovering that even after that horrible truth, I still had strength to choose myself, to choose to live, to choose to leave and never look back again. My dear ones, from the time I ran away until today, 40 years have passed. 40 years of rebuilding, of healing, of learning. It wasn't easy, no. There were days I thought about giving up. There were nights I cried until I fell asleep from exhaustion. But I survived. And more than that, I learned to live again. After those 3 months at Mrs. Teresa's house, I got work as a domestic worker in Nashville. It was a bigger city, farther from Cedar Falls, where I thought nobody would find me. I worked in the house of a good family, Mrs. Marlene and Mr. Gerald. They treated me with respect, paid me properly, gave me a little room in the back to live in. I stayed there 7 years. They were years of hard work, but also of peace. Peace I hadn't known for decades. In 1993, I moved to Memphis to work in the house of a retired couple. I stayed there another 12 years, taking care of them until they passed away. Then I worked in 2 more houses, always as a domestic, always saving every penny I could. I never married again, never wanted to. The idea of sharing life with a man gave me chills. I preferred to stay alone, with my freedom, with my peace. It was only in 2010, when I was already 61, that I decided to return to Cedar Falls. I know it seems crazy, right? Going back to the place where I suffered so much. But you know how it is. We age and miss our homeland. Miss the smell of the air, the way the sun hits the mountains, people talking with that accent I'd known since I was little. And I discovered, through an acquaintance, that Augustus had died in 2008. Heart attack. The children had sold the farm and scattered across America. None of them lived in Cedar Falls anymore. So I came back. I bought a simple little house here in the center of town with the money I had saved all those years of work. It's small, but it's mine. All mine. And here I live my days of peace, finally. I wake up every day early, as I always have, but now it's because I want to, not because someone forces me to. I water my little plants, and how my garden has grown. I have my coffee with cream on the porch. I see the neighbors passing by. I greet everyone. The people here know me as Miss Rose, that quiet lady who lives alone and takes care of the most beautiful flowers on the street. I crochet too. I learned by watching videos on the internet. Yes, this grandma here learned to use the computer. My neighbor's granddaughter taught me. I make little doilies, I make table centerpieces, I make blankets. I sell some at the craft fair we have here every Saturday. It's not to make a lot of money, no. It's more to keep my hands and head busy. And to talk with the other ladies who also sell their little things there. It's nice to have friends, you know? To have people who truly care about you. My routine is simple, and I thank God every day for that. I wake up, take care of the plants, make my coffee. I take a bath, get dressed. I like to get dressed, even when I have nowhere to go. I put on a clean little dress, put on a little lipstick. It's a way of saying, I deserve care, I deserve respect. Even if it's just me giving it to myself. In the morning, after coffee, I sit here in my rocking chair and crochet. I have a blanket I've been making for 3 months now. It's big, with colorful flowers, each little square a different color. When I finish it, I'm going to give it as a gift to Mrs. Teresa. She's still alive, still lives in that village. She's already 100 years old, but firm and strong. I visit her every month, take homemade bread, we have coffee together and talk about life. She was my angel on earth, you know. Without her, I wouldn't be here today. In the afternoon, after lunch, which I make just for myself, well prepared, because I learned I deserve good food, I watch my soap opera. I like the 6 o'clock ones, those lighter, more romantic ones. Then I go to the fair when it's Saturday, or I visit some friend, or I just stay here reading magazines, watching television, resting. At night, before sleeping, I pray my rosary. I thank for everything I have, for the little house, for the little plants, for the friends, for my health, which is still good, thank God, despite everything I went through. I thank for having had courage to leave that house. I thank for every day of freedom. I never had contact with my children again. Never wanted to. I know it might seem harsh, but for me, they died that day I discovered the truth. I don't have anger anymore, no. Anger is tiring, anger makes you sick. But I also don't have desire for reunion, for forgiveness, for those things people think we have to do. I made my peace in my own way, by cutting that past out of my life. But you know what's funny? I have grandchildren now. Not by blood, but by heart. They're the grandchildren of my friends here in the neighborhood. There's little Pete, 5 years old, son of Mrs. Carmen's granddaughter. He calls me Grandma Rose and is always asking for candy. There's little Mary, 7, who loves to stay here at my house watching me crochet. I teach her, help her make the little stitches. There's little Johnny, 3 years old, who calls my house the Flower Grandma's house because he loves to mess with my plants. These children give me a joy I never felt with my own children. Because with them, I can be a real grandmother. A grandmother who gives affection, who tells stories, who makes cookies and lets them lick the bowl. A grandmother who never hits, never yells, never humiliates. A grandmother who protects, who loves, who cares. This is my family now. My friends, my grandchildren of the heart, my little plants, my little house. Is it little? For someone who once had so much, maybe it is. But for someone who had nothing, for someone who lived in hell, this here is paradise. I look out my living room window and see the sunset painting the sky orange and pink. I see children playing in the street. I see neighbors coming back from work. I see life happening out there. And I'm here, sitting in my chair, with my crocheted blanket on my legs, with a cup of lemon balm tea steaming on the side table. I'm at peace. And you know what I've realized in all these years, my dear ones? I realized that the real victory wasn't having run away. The real victory was having learned to live again. It was having looked at that destroyed, broken, hopeless woman and having said, "You deserve good things. You deserve to be happy." And then having fought every single day to make that come true. Today, at 76 years old, I can say with complete certainty, I am happy. Not in the way I dreamed when I was a girl. I don't have a big family. I don't have wealth. I don't have status. But I have something much more valuable. I have myself back. And that, my dear ones, that nobody will ever take from me again. My dear ones, and dear ladies who have accompanied me this far, who have listened to this whole story, I need to say some things that are in my heart. If you're going through something similar to what I went through, if you live in a house where there's no peace, where there's fear, where they hurt you in body or soul, I want you to know you're not alone. You're not alone. And no matter how impossible it seems right now, there is a way out. I know it's difficult. I know it seems like there's nowhere to go, like there's no way to start over, like you don't have strength. I thought all that too. But you know what I discovered? We have more strength than we imagine. We can endure a lot. And when we finally decide we don't want to endure anymore, when we choose our own life, that's when the miracle happens. Not a magic miracle, no. A miracle of courage. A miracle of one step at a time. A miracle of good people who appear along the way to help. I learned in this life that nobody has the right to destroy you. It doesn't matter who it is, husband, son, father, brother, whoever. Nobody has the right to hit you, to humiliate you, to make you feel like you're worth nothing. You are worth something. Worth a lot. Worth everything. I learned that sometimes we need to let go even of those who share our blood, if those people only bring destruction. Family isn't just those born from the same womb. Family is those who care, who respect, who truly love. I lost 15 children, but I gained a family of the heart, and that family saved me. I learned that it's never too late to start over. I was 36 when I ran away. I had my whole body beaten, my self-esteem on the ground, without a penny in my pocket. But I started over. I worked hard, saved money, built a new life. If I could do it, you can too. I learned that life can be good. It can be simple, it can be quiet, but it can be good. It can be a rocking chair on the porch, a cup of hot coffee, a little plant growing in a pot. It can be a child's smile calling you grandma. It can be sleeping at night without fear of waking up getting beaten. It can be freedom. And I learned, mainly, that the most important thing isn't the size of the life we live. It's the quality. It's waking up and knowing you chose that day. It's lying down and knowing nobody hurt you. It's looking in the mirror and recognizing the person who's looking back at you. That's victory. That's overcoming. So my love, if you're suffering, seek help. Look for someone you trust, a friend, a neighbor, someone from church, someone at work. Look for the authorities in your country, the places that exist to protect people who are in situations of violence. In the United States, for example, there are domestic violence hotlines, there are shelters, there are people willing to help. In other countries, too. Research, get informed, and don't be ashamed to ask for help. Those who should be ashamed are those who hit, not those who get hit. And if you know someone who's going through this, don't turn your back. Don't pretend you don't see. Extend your hand. Be the angel that Mrs. Teresa was for me. You can save a life. You can change someone's destiny. And that, my dear ones, is one of the most beautiful things one human being can do for another. I survived. More than that, I won. I conquered fear, I conquered trauma, I conquered pain. And if I won, you can win too. Believe in yourself. Believe you deserve good things. And fight. Fight for yourself, for your life, for your peace. Now, my dear ones, I'm going to make a special request to you who made it to the end of this video. If this story touched your heart, if you think it can help someone, subscribe to Grandparents' Tales and turn on the notification bell. It's important, did you hear? There are so many people suffering in silence, so many people who need to hear that there is a way out, that it's possible to start over. Each subscription, each time you share these videos, is one more person who can be reached, one more life that can be saved. And leave here in the comments one word. Just one word that summarizes what you felt with this story. It can be strength, it can be courage, it can be hope, it can be any word that's in your heart now. I read all the comments, each one of them, and I'm so happy to know this story reached you. Let's create a chain of support, a network of affection and strength for those who need it. Do this now. Don't wait another minute. Someone might urgently need this message, and you could be the instrument to bring hope to that person. And for you who are suffering now while watching this video, I see you. I understand you. I've been where you are, and I'm here on the other side to tell you. It's worth fighting. It's worth surviving. Life can be good again. believe it. Thank you, my dear ones, for having listened to me this far. Thank you for having opened your hearts to this story so difficult, but also so important. May God bless each one of you. May He bless you with peace, with love, with protection. And may we never forget, we are stronger than we think, and always, always, it's worth choosing life. A kiss in the heart of each one, from Grandma Rose. Until next time, my loves.